Coffee and Cream on Hail Varsity Radio with Andrew Rogers and Damon Benning.
From Omaha, Nebraska, Terrence Bud Crawford.
Oh, the right hook! And it's not just the jab, the uppercut, and the counter right hook. The left to right, Errol Spence on inline skates. And the referee has intervened. Mamma mia! Terrence Bud Crawford has made history.
All in all, I get to say I told y'all, because I've been asking for these fights for years, and y'all been saying, oh, he's too small, he's going to get this, he's going to get broken. And each and every time that I step up, I proved y'all wrong. Each time. So, write some great stories about Terrence Crawford. Don't hate on him. Don't say nothing negative. Just give me my props.
Good morning, everybody. I'm back, but Ravi's still in the chair. DB isn't back yet.
Still waiting on
People
DB.
are probably like, hey, where is that guy? Oh, he's down in Lincoln today. So DB will be on with us at 7:45, but he won't be on for the show today. He will be back tomorrow. At least we think he'll be back tomorrow.
That's what I'm told.
I'm guessing that's the case. Shane, I've been gone so long, I forgot to log into the stream. So Sasha will probably have my head for that a little bit later. Here he is. He's jawing at me. Nothing. Was I missed? No. Guaranteed no. There you go. Walk away, Shane.
Principal's coming over to make sure we're all in line here.
Yeah, if Shane was the principal, this school would be burning to the ground.
We might be in trouble.
Ravi, good morning.
How are you, man?
Hey, I'm good. I'm refreshed, back from a great trip to the Smoky Mountains. You know what's funny about my trip to Gatlinburg?
What's that?
Nobody talks about their trip to Gatlinburg until somebody's going to Gatlinburg.
Yeah.
So Gatlinburg's one of those places apparently everybody's been to, but nobody says anything about it until somebody's actually going to Gatlinburg. The amount of people that I've come across just saying like, hey, I'm going to the Smokies. It's the first time, on that side of really the country. I shouldn't say the country. Like that mountain range. Because I've been to the Rockies before. So that was my first time in the Smokies. And, Gatlinburg, it's amazing. You're going to have so much fun. I'm like, you've been to Gatlinburg? And they're like, yeah, you got to try this place and that place. But it's not just one person that says that.
Yeah.
It's 1,000 people that talk about their trip to Gatlinburg after you say you're going. It's just, it's humorous.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I have never been to Gatlinburg.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, that doesn't make me feel better, but I do think I think it's pretty funny that that's how things work. But aside from that, the trip was good. Family time was good.
Yeah.
I stayed away from sports as much as I could, but I couldn't stay away from sports betting because Tennessee being a state that allows mobile sports betting, which if Nebraska did that, they would take a lot of my money.
Your boy might be in trouble.
Instead, they chose to just do kiosks down at Warhorse. So if I'm going to make the drive, well, I have to get the printed ticket. I don't have the luxury to do it on my phone, which is probably a good thing. Like Warhorse is saving me money and it's probably just saving my relationship altogether.
Maybe costing you some wins.
And also costing me wins. You're right.
You some W's.
Hey, glass half full guy. I love it.
Home run parlays. I mean, come on. What are
I
we
did
doing
hit
here?
one. I did hit one out in Tennessee.
There we go.
So there was some love there, but then I also went like 5 out of 6 on numerous parlays. We don't need to get down that rabbit hole. Although I did talk to a buddy of mine though, who's good friends with Brian Edwards.
Okay.
And he's like, yeah, I talk to Andrew every week. This is Brian talking to my buddy Scott. Yeah, I talk to Andrew every week. Man, that guy loves his parlays.
It's got to be touchdown.
I'm like, B, you know me.
Well, listen, everybody likes what they like. And as you know, I
don't
say
like it.
Parlays are more fun.
They are.
I get they're not
the
as
payout is
right. I get they're not
what's
as
most fun about it all.
Safe or smart as far as the actual betting strategy. But if you're just doing it for entertainment, which is what I do it for, what you do it for, I'm not like, is it nice to make money? Sure. but this isn't part of a larger financial.
Robbie, I don't think you get it. This is not for pure entertainment. This is for change in my pockets.
Right. You got a little
and right now my wallet's a little empty.
A little lighter.
It's a little on the light side. I opened it up the other day and out came just poof. It was like when LeBron tosses baby powder in the air. That's what happened when I opened up my
dust.
wallet. And maybe a gnat flew out of it. Yeah, I'm not sure. But no, the weekend was, I guess the overall week was really fun. We had great weather, and I think, did Omaha have pretty good weather last week as well? It was hot on one of the days. I heard it was like 101
on most of the days.
Okay, never mind.
It was 100 for most of the week.
We were in like the mid to high 80s.
That's not bad.
No, it was fantastic.
It was 100 with like 90% humidity most of the week, so you didn't miss anything.
Okay, good.
It was oppressive.
Did we get rain at all? Because my grass doesn't look as bad as I thought it would.
It rained some, but not. It was so hot that I think it kept the grass from growing hardly at all.
Yeah,
but it was rough. It was a little rough.
Singed it a little bit.
It was a little rough out. I'm gonna be honest with you.
No. So when we were in this great cabin in the Smokies, at very top of the mountain. I posted some. Here we go. This is horrible radio, but I'm going to show you. We were at the very top of this mountain, and that was our view. So we just had a view of. I mean, for miles you were looking at the Smoky Mountains, and then off to the right you saw downtown Gatlinburg, which acted as if like it was the hick Las Vegas Strip. There was so much traffic.
I thought Starkville had that claim. Was Stark Vegas?
I don't know.
It might be Gatlinburg.
I don't know. Gatlinburg comes close. Pigeon Forge is a close second.
Incredible town name, by the way.
Pigeon Forge. Yes.
Elite town.
Like that may be top 10 in the country.
If I had to just like pick a random name generator for a town in the Appalachians, Pigeon Forge is at the top of the list.
And it checks all the boxes when I saw a 12-year-old kid riding in the bed of a truck in a lawn chair with his sunglasses on, acting like that was normal.
I mean, it was probably just him being him.
And it was Main Road, driving past Popo, and nobody saying a word. It was this kid acting like he does this all the time on 45, 50 mile per hour roads. It wasn't back roads. This was 2-lane, sort of like highway roads.
I'd be a little concerned about the chair sliding around a little bit. Maybe they got it.
He stayed in one spot. He had to have that thing bungee corded down.
It must have been bolted in there or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
Here's the real question though: was he seat belted into the lawn chair?
No. And I was trying to snag a photo, but I didn't want to be. So he was wearing sunglasses, and I didn't know. Are you looking at me? Are you looking off to the side? Could I get away with taking a photo of you right now? So I waited till the car got going.
Yeah.
Or the truck, I should say, got going. And as it made the turn, I like went up really quick with the phone, snapped a photo, and brought it back down, and just acted. You start whistling like, no, nothing to see here.
Yeah, you got to do like the act like you're, we're on StreamYard and or YouTube here, so you kind of have to do the act like you're just like looking at your phone.
I know, and that's what it was. But I didn't want to be so obvious because the truck is obviously higher up off the ground than our Escape that we were driving in, and so I would have had to go like something like this.
So and
I'm like, I am not holding up the body of Christ like the priest.
So here's what you got to do when you're doing that. So you got to find somebody next to you and like put your arm around them like you're doing a selfie, but just don't flip the camera around.
Right.
So that's how you get away with the up high camera mode.
Although I was in the car with my brother, and that kid was probably thinking if his mind was in the gutter.
Just be like a selfie. I mean, let's see, he's from Tennessee. He probably sees it all the time.
Okay, moving on.
Speaking of Vegas,
what I'm going in.
Well,
in January. You mean the fight?
We had a little fight
that we
this weekend.
Got to watch. By the way, I was at Buffalo Wild Wings. No free shout outs. I was at B-Dubs, and they have like 50 TVs in that restaurant.
Probably
every TV showing UFC. Every single one.
Yeah.
Not one could show the fight.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was just because they didn't want to pay for it or they didn't have, the ability to put it on. But I ended up watching
not the other.
Yeah. I ended up watching that on my phone.
Ooh, that's tough.
Because I was at B-Dubs thinking, I could get the fight here. I could probably watch UFC at the same time. Nope. 300 TVs and every single one had DP taking a foot to the face after Crawford. just decided to really extinguish any hater fire that is still left out there.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing? What? Not we. I'm going to just the general public. Like, can we finally just stop talking? Can we finally just zip up the yapper?
Yeah.
Shut your mouth.
Unless you're saying Bud Crawford's the best fighter in the world, which he is.
Right now, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, there's no
comp.
No, there's really not. Especially,
he may go down as top 5 all time.
Well, and that's kind of what I was thinking about as I'm watching just him dismantle. I mean, like, he fully undressed probably another top 5-7 boxer in the world right now. Just embarrassed him. And as I'm watching this, I go, I think we've moved past the, okay, is he 1 or 2 pound for pound, and into the where is he on an all-time great scale? Because, you know, obviously his domination of the welterweight division since he moved up has been incredible. Like, you don't see a guy get more powerful and more knockouts when he's moving up in divisions, especially a guy like Bud that was considered to be a smaller welterweight in the first place. And he's just like, no, I'm going to knock all of you fools out.
And you don't see a guy pair up titles either.
No, well, that was the other thing, right? So he's the only guy in the 4-belt era to unify 2 different weight divisions. He did it at either lightweight or super lightweight. Yeah, super lightweight. And then at welterweight as well. And I mean, it's a thing that's literally never been done before. And I get we're only going back so far with that many belts, but anybody else that you want to put up against him right now can't say that. Most people you want to put up against him historically can't say they've done what he's done. And like, I'm having a hard time putting into context, whether within boxing or within other sports, the domination that we saw on Saturday, because it was so, I mean, it was legitimately, I think the highest Crawford got on the odds was like -160. That's barely more than a coin flip fight, right? You're talking about, that's, Vegas sees that as like a 55-45 type situation.
And then 7 rounds in, he was
not
minus 1,600.
Oh, by 7, I think by the end of the 7th, he was minus 8,000. It was after like 5, he was minus 1,600. It was crazy because so he had the knockout in round 2, right? 3rd round,
knocked down
in round 2. First time Spence has ever been down in his life.
And it was more like he got his feet tangled up.
Well, it wasn't his feet. I think he did lose his balance, but the way he was like leaned in and Crawford caught him, I think it was more of a balance issue than anything else. But so you see the knockdown in round 2. Round 3, Spence comes back and is a little more active, I think, kind of trying to make up for it on the cards. But by the end,
that was most rounds for him. For the first 30 seconds, it seemed like Spence was just giving everything he had.
But by the end of round 4, I was like, oh, this thing is not turning around for Spence. It just wasn't. And he looked, I mean, by the end of round like 4 or 5, he looked pretty battered already. And it was just kind of a matter
of Spence is good.
Spence is really good. Like, that's the crazy thing about this is Spence was the toughest test for Crawford. Spence was his best opponent to date. And he did the same thing to Spence that he's done to everybody else.
But I don't even know if I would say like best opponent to date because of what you just said on the back end of your sentence there. Crawford is in another tier.
Yeah.
He's on another level than everybody else. That's why I think people need to reassess what they've been saying, because you can't put just the next best guy up against him and say, hey, he's the best one he's seen. No, because a few years ago, it was this person. And a few years ago before that, it was this person. You can't just keep adding guys and saying, oh, well, now he finally has a true test. No, just accept that he's the greatest.
Yeah.
Just accept that. And I know that comes with the territory.
Yeah.
When you are the greatest, you're going to take criticism for everything.
Yeah,
because people with glass houses shouldn't throw stones is really what it boils down to.
Or glass jaws for that matter.
Yeah. Spence was blocking way too many punches with his face.
Yes. The thing that caught my attention early was every time Bud was throwing that jab, because he came out in southpaw, so he's throwing these right-handed heavy jabs, and they were splitting Spence's guard every single time. Like, Spence could not keep that jab from landing, and because he is right-handed, people forget because he fights with southpaw so much, but because he's right-handed, he's getting so much pop off of those jabs that there was nothing Spence could do. It was crazy. And the other thing that caught my attention early on is it seemed really apparent, and I don't know if it happened just before or just after the knockdown in the second round. Bud seemed to realize pretty early that he was not afraid of Spence hurting him.
No, that was from the very beginning when he apparently lost the first round.
Which, listen, I'll give it a coin flip in the first round. You want to give it to Spence, whatever. None of the rest of the rounds were close, with maybe the exception of 3, but I think Bud was more active. But the reason that it went the way it did so quickly and that Spence got battered so quickly was that Crawford realized super early in the fight, oh, this guy doesn't have enough juice to hurt me. So he was willing to take some more chances and leave himself a little bit open because he's like, A, I think I can still get out of the way. And B, even when he does land contact, it doesn't hurt. Like the second knockdown, so the first one of the 7th round, Spence lands a shot. Bud just lands a better shot and puts him down. That was the whole fight. It's like, yeah, Spence might land a couple. They're not actually doing anything. And that was the crazy part because Spence is the bigger fighter. He was thought to have more power. His KO rate on his career just was slightly higher. And you thought if anybody was going to do damage with those shots, it was going to be Spence. And guess what? We found out. Yeah, Bud's just better.
How often when you were watching that fight, you know what? Let's start here. Before you even got to watching the fight, how often were you thinking going into the fight that there would be a knockout to decide it?
So I called Bud TKO 10 is what I predicted. So I thought Bud was going to finish him. I didn't think it was going to look like that. I didn't think, even though I was only off by a round, I thought it was going to be your traditional Bud fight is where he feels the guy out for 3-4 rounds, and then he starts to exploit what he figured out in that first. Man, he figured it out, Spence, so fast. That was when it was clear that he had already figured Spence out. I was like, oh, this is going to be over faster than I thought. And it ended up not being as fast as I thought, but you probably could have called that thing in 7. I mean, after the second knockdown,
you could have, but that knockdown, as much as I want to say that it was a lot, it was more brutal than the first.
The 2 and the 7th were dramatically more brutal than the first one.
But I still think with the way Spence stood up and the way that he looked, it was fine. I really couldn't believe that a fight got called with a dude on his feet. Like that kind of was like the ref took notice about how his eyes looked in that moment.
Well, and he had just stopped protecting himself.
Oh, well,
that was the big one. Yeah.
He tried standing up like a baby bird.
Yeah.
Like he was just hobbling around trying to catch his feet, and he was too open. He was open for any punch to really put him away for.
And that's what you saw is Crawford was just teeing off on him, and the hands weren't even he wasn't.
They weren't even close.
Yeah, like there wasn't even a guard.
It was smart. It was smart to wave it off for the health of Spence.
Yes,
but it still was like a eyebrow raiser of okay. The ref noticed something here that we can't really see on TV, but up close, the official was like, all right, like this is over. We're waving this thing off.
I think there were points anytime through the 7th, 8th, and 9th round where it looked like Spence had stopped protecting himself. In the 7th, between the 2 knockdowns, he was trying to fight back a little bit more. But honestly, by the 8th, it was just kind of like, this is just we're just waiting for it to happen. And the question was, is Spence going to get hurt before it happens? Right. So, I mean, the ref did the right thing because it was the outcome had not been in doubt for some time at that point. And you almost look at, and I know this doesn't happen very often, but you almost look at Spence's corner. If you're watching your guy and you're like, hey, like he's not protecting himself, he's not fighting back. Like they were about to have to make a decision if the ref didn't, because he was in trouble. Like he was in danger of actually getting hurt. And so the ref did the right thing. I thought the stoppage was good. Like I said, maybe a round late, but it certainly could not have gone on much longer and have been responsible to Spence at all.
Yeah, kudos to Bud on taking Spence down. I'm not sure what a second fight actually looks like at this point.
They're talking about maybe moving up weight classes because Spence is a little bit bigger. They're talking about him moving to 154. Bud said he's been open to that. So I think the thought, again, is, oh, well, Spence had to cut too much weight. So if he doesn't have to cut as much weight, then he'll have a better shot.
Let's keep making excuses against the best fighter in the world.
If you watch that fight, like, Spence is putting that guy down at any weight, it does not matter. Or now Crawford's putting Spence down at any weight, at any, I don't care what division they're in. Spence was outclassed. That's the long and short of it. And so I'm sure Crawford would be fine fighting at 154. I'm sure he would not care at all.
Crawford could put a bunch of weight on and fight him closer to 180 if he wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, it was the technical prowess and just the IQ and everything that we talk about with Bud was just, and he didn't even, the crazy thing, and my buddy Matt DiMarino, who I was watching the fight with, pointed this out, is Spence didn't even force Bud to make the adjustment, right? Bud came out doing the same thing, and it worked the entire time. Because a lot of times you'll see him start southpaw, then he'll switch at some point, right? After he figures out what's working. He just stayed southpaw the whole time and just hammered him with that jab over and over and over again, and then waited to counter punch when Spence overextended himself trying to fight back. He didn't even have to make the adjustment.
He played the long game.
So it's like, congratulations, you want a rematch. Like, you only saw one card from Crawford. That's not going to go well.
And even if Bud decided to stick with the same game plan, result would be the same. Result would be the same.
Going southpaw on Spence really took away his best punch, and it seemed like he just didn't know what to do.
Well, and Bud's so good at defending.
Yeah.
So good because he plays the long game that even when he got beat up against the ropes a couple of times.
He was catching almost everything with his forearm.
Well, he could also bounce back off the ropes as quickly as he got on them.
Yeah, and he does not seem concerned about being on the ropes.
There were a lot of defensive combinations that I took notice of too, and I'm not a huge boxing fan. I'm not a boxing analyst. These are just kind of things that are I probably take more of a beginner approach when I look at all this. But his ability to put together a defensive combination to stop whatever was coming his way, it was because really what I saw Spence start to do was go for the body. He was trying to get to the body so then he could get to the head. Well, then he would start at the head, and it was like block, body block low. And I'm like, how in the world did you read that? I know Bud watches film. Yeah. And all these fighters do.
A lot of it's instinctual too.
Right. But how do you just pick that up? How do you do that quickly?
Yeah. Well,
bang, bang, bang. And it was all blocks and then a jab to the nose.
Yeah. The crazy thing was so much of what happened was, okay, Spence is trying to go upstairs. He catches it on the forearms or the hands, and so not really doing any damage. And then he would try and work downstairs, and then, like you said, he would drop that elbow, and Spence is just running into the elbows. The only time Bud really got hit was when he was allowing himself to get hit, so he could take the shot to put Spence down. It was one of the most dominating championship performances in any sport I think I've ever seen.
And when I'm in Vegas in January, who knows? Maybe the next fight's in January in Vegas again, right?
Can we do that? Can we do that?
I don't know.
Spence wanted it before the end of the year, and I was you may want to talk to the doctor first, bud.
You may want to give it a month. Once again, fall camp begins today. We'll talk to DB at 7:45. There's a couple other tidbits of information we want to get to regarding the Nebraska football program. We'll do that next. It's Coffee and Cream.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 5 minutes.
Like I've been saying before, they don't understand how strong I am.
When I fought Jeff Horn, I was stronger than him. When I fought Sean Porter, I was stronger than him. When I fought Kell Brook, I was stronger than him. Physically. They might have been bigger than me, but I was physically stronger than them.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes.
Like I've been.
Sharp jab, fast, explosive jab to the head and the body. And there's a combination that dropped Errol Spence for the first time in his career. The lightning hand speed.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
Like I've been saying before, they don't understand how strong I am. When I fought Jeff Horn, I was stronger than him. When I fought Sean Porter, I was stronger than him. When I fought Kell Brook, I was stronger than him. Physically. They might have been bigger than me, but I was physically stronger than them, and I felt it in the ring.
Welcome back, Coffee and Cream in the morning on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Currency. Ravi Lulla in for Damon Benning. I'm Andrew Rogers, back from vacation. DB out in Lincoln. We'll get to him in the next in the next segment. In just about 15 minutes, you'll hear from Damon Benning. And you can catch us on 590 ESPN Radio here in Omaha. We're live on Twitter, live on YouTube, the Hurrdat Sports YouTube page. Check us out there. I'm looking at the comments right now, and Nick gives a congratulatory message to Bud Crawford. Thomas wants to know what happened to Cappuccino and Mocha Latte. The Venti boys will rise again. I am curious to know, Ravi, where that stemmed from.
I think it was.
Are you Cappuccino?
I don't remember. Michael Severe, when he was here on Thursday.
Now it doesn't shock me that it was you two.
Yeah.
It wasn't you and Sauter.
No.
It wasn't you and JP. It was you and Severe. That doesn't shock me one bit. We put the two class clowns in charge because we already mentioned that Shane's the principal, apparently.
Yeah, I think so.
This is what we got to. This is where we're at.
Yeah, Severe, I think, whenever I said the name, he came up with an alternative that he thought fit us better. So
the Venti boys.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I think
what is Venti? Have you ever seen that? Gosh, is it Role Models, the movie with Paul Rudd? And
yeah.
Venti is large.
Yeah.
No, large is large.
No, Venti is 20. Grande literally means large.
Congratulations, you're stupid in 3 languages. And Terrence adds in, when the doctor comes to check on you after you get up from the bench right before the bell, you know the fight isn't going your way.
Yeah, that was bizarre. That was after the 4th round. The doctor just comes over and starts checking out Spence at, I think, the ref's request. And I was like, holy crap, this must be even worse than we can tell on television. That was not a good sign for Spence.
Speaking of bizarre situations, I saw on Friday, and it kind of came.
It sort of
slid
under the radar a little bit.
It did, and it not that it was like, hey, this got covered up and that's it. It was more like, whoa, and then you moved on so quickly.
Yeah.
Did anybody happen to catch the news about Bob Wager?
Yeah.
And his resignation from the Nebraska football program. Wager was he cited for a DUI? Is that what I saw?
Cited for suspicion of DUI.
Suspicion of DUI. And, in a lot of situations like this, you don't see a coach just instantly step down. You try to go through
kind of the process,
the necessary processes to get from point A to point B, and how you can respond or recover from it. No, it was just a clean cut resignation, and Josh Martin steps in.
Yeah.
And that's that. And I think that's why it slid under the radar so much, because they had their replacement already in line.
It really didn't drag out at all.
The situation took place, and boom, resigns. That's that, right? What I didn't appreciate was certain media members in town kicking a man while he was down. I did not enjoy that too much. And I know those people know who they are. And not to say that you don't have a right to be critical, but don't start talking about him not doing his job properly after something like this happens.
Well, yeah, I think there's a couple things here that are important to think about. Obviously, a DUI is a super serious situation, right? It's an obvious lack of judgment, at least in the moment, and a really serious thing. Like people's lives can be in danger when you choose to make that choice, right? So do not in any way want to downplay the seriousness of what happened, or what is supposed to have happened based on the citation. That being said, I know very little about Bob Wager as a human being. I mean, he hasn't been around here that long. So it's really hard for me to go into any sort of character judgment based on this one thing that we know about him, right? And so, that's something I try and avoid in a situation like this, where he's literally been here just a few months. Like, we don't know hardly anything about Bob Wager, and including whether or not he was doing his job well. We haven't really gotten to a point where we would know if he was doing his job well or not, right? Like, maybe he was doing a fantastic job. Maybe he wasn't. I have no idea, because at this part of the season, for a position coach, you're not going to have a ton of data points to know if he's doing a good job or not.
At least up to this point, what you can assess is what the room looks like now.
Sure.
And what the room looks like.
Looks pretty good.
It looks okay.
Yeah.
And you landed one of the top tight end recruits in the country.
Yeah.
And you can say what you want. You can say he had a huge part in that. You can say he had no part in that.
I have no idea.
I have no idea. But still, outside looking in, all you see is this player from Ainsworth landing in your room.
Yeah. And you have to assume, it would be silly to assume he had nothing to do with it.
It's easy to kick a man while he's down.
Right.
That's all I'm going to end up saying.
It is. And it's, again, you can say, hey, that's a really bad mistake. That's a really bad decision, really irresponsible. Outside of that, unless you know him on a level that I don't, and I don't think most of us do, it's really hard. And, I'm sure I've done it at times where there was somebody that for some reason I didn't like and didn't have, maybe there was a longer history there or something like that with a public figure that's like, yeah, that guy's not for me. Like, I don't really love what he's about. I don't know anything about Bob Wager, so I have a hard time saying anything except for like, yeah, this was a bad mistake. And, he was caught for it, so he's got the legal consequences, whatever those end up being. He lost his job for it, so there's consequences there. Sometimes what I don't understand is what we want to happen when people make a mistake, right? I think we want to see consequences, which is understandable. That's kind of the society we live in, and it's understandable.
Our society is built on laws.
Right.
So, yeah.
And so it's like when you do something wrong, we want to see, some people call it justice, some people call it consequences, whatever you want to see. So I understand that. But obviously, Bob Wager is suffering consequences. It's not like he's getting away with it legally. He's not getting away with it occupationally. So I guess at that point, it's like, I don't know what else you want. Like, you want your pound of flesh too. Like, I don't understand. Like, what's the point there at that point? Now, if Nebraska had maybe continued his hiring and been on staff still, maybe you can start asking questions there. But that's not what happened.
Right.
From the time he had the DUI to the time he resigned, I think was like less than 72 hours. Like, it was really quick. He had it either Tuesday or Wednesday, and he resigned by Friday. I mean, it was bing, bang, boom, we are done here.
Speaks to the culture of what's going on at Nebraska,
or at least what they're trying to, right? And so that's, if you want to ask questions if the guy keeps his job, that's a different scenario, but that's not what happened here.
Now, on top of that, I did see some other bad takes about how Coach Rhule should somehow be responsible for what had taken place, and because he's the one that brought him on staff.
Sure. I'm sure Coach Rhule is as disappointed as any of us.
That doesn't make any sense, though.
No.
Because he's not responsible for how a grown man operates outside of that building.
This is dramatically different than situations where...
in his personal life, I should say, when he's not on the worker clock.
So, this is... because I think some people want to make the comparison. It's like, well, we expect Pat Fitzgerald to know everything that's going on. It's like, those are things that were going on within the football program, within facility walls,
under
his watch, right? This is what a person decides to do when they are on their free time or when they go home. They're not on the clock. They're not acting as a representative of the University of Nebraska, which I think one of the things Bob Wager probably realizes now is you're always acting as a representative of the University of Nebraska in a position like this. But Rhule did what he could. He brought in a guy that he thought was a good fit for Nebraska. And from a recruiting standpoint and a connections to Texas standpoint, he probably was a good fit. But for whatever reason,
because he had a lot of high school connections.
Yeah, and that was a head coach in the state of Texas forever. Obviously, this happened. Rhule said, hey, I don't want this to be a part of my program. And I'm sure asked for his resignation if it wasn't offered just freely. So I really don't know how you put this on Rhule. I think he handled it kind of as best as he could.
I don't even know how
else could you?
We don't even have enough information to say that how this situation ended up going down.
Sure, yeah.
Like, these are all just assumptions at this point.
Right. I'm assuming Wager came to Rhule and told him what happened, and either Wager came to him offering to resign right off the bat or Rhule asked for it. I mean, I don't know how else you could have handled it in a way that would have been more satisfying to people in terms of getting their justice or whatever, And again, that's not to downplay the seriousness of what happened. It's just...
well, it did go quick, and maybe they already have that stipulation.
Yeah, I'm sure the standard was set.
Yeah, I'm sure there is he's got a standard for everything else. I'm sure there is a standard for off the field conduct.
All right, well, let's add some sunshine to the show now and change gears and talk to Damon Betting, who's down in Lincoln.
Let's go.
We'll talk a little bit about that sit down he had with Coach Rhule that got released over the weekend. It was pretty fantastic. If you missed it, check it out after the show, but we're talking to DB next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes.
Sharp jab, fast, explosive jab to the head and the body. And there's a combination that drops Errol Spence for the first time in his career. And left hand speed. 7, 8.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
Sharp jab, fast, explosive jab to the head and the body. And there's a combination that drops Errol Spence for the first time in his career. That lightning hand speed. 7, 8. Terrence Bud Crawford, an electrifying combination that drops Errol Spence in round 2.
As we wait on our guy DB, I'll take a moment and tell you about the Beanery, the official coffee of Coffee and Cream, Gretna Pavilion and Ashland's community coffee shop. Come hang out with the people over at the Beanery because they are, some of the nicest people you'll run into throughout your day. They'll definitely put a smile on your face, that's for sure. I always drive through the Pavilion location, and the people working there are unmatched. Absolutely unmatched. That's why they're the official coffee of Coffee and Cream. Check them out in the morning because they serve people coffee, and that's what they do. That's their slogan. It's the Beanery. Let's go to the phone and talk to our main man, DB, who I haven't seen or really talked to in what seems like an eternity. DB, good morning. What's up, man?
Listen, you're my bad luck. If you can believe this, since you've been gone, I haven't cut my hair at all after going about 36 straight weeks on a Friday. The schedule has just been a monster, man. So I look terrible. Thank you.
Man. Oh, you're welcome, I guess. It always falls down on me. Now
we're going 2.5 weeks without so much as a fade.
There's no way you look bad though, because your hair is always so clean cut and short. There's no way.
Trust me, when you can see that it's messed up on top, it's not good. Not good.
Are you wearing a hat today?
I look like Bud Crawford getting ready for Spence, right? I just let my hair grow.
Yes, all right. Hey, talk about that fight quickly before we get into some thoughts on your sit down with Rhule, because that was just a true butt whooping.
Yeah, he's something else, right? And when we were younger, I would tell him he's just stubborn, right? Now that he's grown and mature, it's turned into determined, right? There's just something about his personality. It's hard for me to explain, but I always tell people, they ask me, hey, what's going to be the difference here? And it's not, he's competitive. He's ultra competitive, but the real word is he is determined. Whenever you go there with him, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's an argument, if it's, Call of Duty, if it's hitting a speed bag, if it's being able to sit in a man-made sauna that you think is not very safe and he doesn't think you have the courage.
That sounds really specific.
Whatever it is, he's just determined, and he's going to figure it out how to get it done. And so you got to be willing to walk through the fire. It's not coach speak. It's not no pun. And Spence found out you have to be able to walk through. It's like the desert, man. If you want to get to the promised land, and 99.999% of the people that compete against him just aren't willing to do it.
Mm-mm. Damon, all of that is true, but I feel like when we focus on those things, we maybe don't give enough credit to how physically gifted he is. Because I get he's not a big guy, especially at 147, but we've seen it against, we heard a clip earlier that Shane played. We saw it against Spence, who's a bigger fighter. We saw it against Kel Brook. Every guy, we saw it against Jeff Horn. Every guy he's gone in there against that was bigger, he's like, yeah, I was stronger though. And we've seen it play out that way, whether it's his elite defensive ability, whether it's his crazy quickness, the footwork, the ability to go southpaw or orthodox basically at a moment's notice without even thinking about it. And then the finishing power, even at a higher weight class. Like, you're right with all of the determination and the intangibles and the mental side of things, but the physical side is as elite as it gets too, right? Like, I feel like we kind of forget that part.
Oh, yeah. He can hit a softball. He can hit a baseball. He loves to hoop. He's got great hand-eye coordination. He's an unbelievable ping-pong player. He's way athletic. Like, there's no question about that. And it's funny because I was telling people, this is in hindsight. I was saying this before he fought. Like, it's just weird how people confuse bigger with stronger. Just because you're bigger doesn't mean you're stronger. Postall tried to bully him. Horn tried to bully him. Beltran couldn't bully him. Cale Brook got pushed around. Like, he's just his leverage with his long arms and his core. Some of his exercises that he does that don't even utilize a weight are unbelievable, right? He could have his butt at a 45 to a wall, right? And he can put his right shoulder on the wall and rotate the other way to get both shoulders to touch the wall, right? It's just like a stretch where you look at yourself and you're like, the body's not made to corkscrew like that, but he can just do it. He can do front handsprings. He can do back spring. He's a really gifted athlete that can use. He's not only ambidextrous. He can use both hands. He can use both feet too. So, if you played kickball with him, he can use his right or his left foot. And it starts by doing ridiculous stuff. You just tell him that he can't.
Yeah.
And in about 2 weeks, he'll show you that he can. That's just really who he is.
All right, DB, let's change gears. Fall camp opens today. You're down at practice for a multitude of reasons. But the sit down with Coach Rhule that got released on Friday just, I think, had people in wow mode. I've been teasing this info, knowing it for a long time, but wondering if, insiders around town have heard it too. And now it's made public. Coach Rhule's main focus to success in year one, the engine that will make this team go, is defense. It starts with defense. Were you surprised to hear all the other answers over the course of time from when you conducted the interview from now when it dropped?
Yeah, I was a little bit because I felt like, and this time I did have an unfair advantage, right? Because I knew a couple months ago what his focus was, but it's what he's been talking about too in the off season with his willingness to go out and hire Tony White and what he felt like Tony White brought to the table, why he liked this defensive scheme, because it allows you to be flexible without having to overthink it. It hit all the benchmarks in terms of, can I get easy checks? Can we have a common language? Do I have the body types to utilize it? And he thinks defense is the most portable thing to take with you in your first year. So that was going to be his focus. When he's watching all of that film, when he first got here, his kids are sitting down watching TV. They focused on the black shirts in all those old school games. Like it wasn't. He liked the little offensive run game and the two-back run game and trap and veer, but he fell in love with guys running to the football. And if you go back, while it was pretty vanilla, what's the one thing we saw in the spring game? Multiple defensive players in the monitor or at the ball, because they're running to the football. He wants to be able to talk about black shirts and talk about it with some pride.
Damon, as you went through, I think it ended up being like a 90-minute interview. We got it down to about 60 for YouTube. What was something that either caught you off guard, maybe took you by surprise a little bit while you're having that conversation with Rhule that you just were not expecting to maybe go there?
The consistency of the message, for one. It didn't matter. So let's say we're getting into how he wants to win football games versus how he wants to parent in his household versus what kind of husband he wants to be versus what kind of head coach he wants to be. They're like these traits that are all intertwined throughout. And he's going to be the guy that's a lifelong learner. He's going to process information. He's going to pit it against his own authenticity, and then he's going to try to communicate those ideas. It's interwoven through everything that he does. Whether he's coaching or he's talking to Julie or he's talking to the girls. If you go in his office and they're like these little PlayStations, and I don't mean the video games, I mean where his girls have been. He's got one that's diehard. She thinks she's going to be a coach. You may see some drawings of some plays and some X's and O's, and then he's got a princess on the other side, and she may have her artwork in rainbows. It's everything that he does. It's kind of modeled through building relationships, and I think you're going to see that when he coaches. He talks about it when he reprimands players or what coaches can bring to staff meetings. It's all about relationships, and I just think that's the essence of who he is. And I was surprised that if I asked him about eating a burger, I think he would tell me the art to it would be the relationship between the bread, the bun, and kind of how he feels about it. Like I know he could weave that in.
DB, adding to that, I was catching up on my Big Ten Media Day coverage, and now I really understand why you draw a lot of comparison with him and Coach Fickell, because the first thing that Coach Fickell said at Big Ten Media Days that he finds immediate success, or more than like the schemes that they carry over, are the people that come with him, or the relationships that he starts there. So I get it. I really do get it now with a lot of these guys and the comparisons that are drawn. Hey, we only
and I think you know my personality, so you know what I'm drawn to.
That's true too. That's the unfair advantage for me.
I like it's like Purdue. I mean, Purdue's got a great hire.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's going to win games, but they got a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
I can say that.
Hey, DB, we appreciate you, man. One last thing. What's the energy like down there? Who have you come into contact with? Is the energy up?
Well, we're getting ready to pull in, but yesterday I can tell you those guys started to trickle in early. What time? About 2 o'clock, and there was I got Knucklehead with me, so that's who you hear. But they're ready to go. The coaches are chomping at the bit. The players are too.
All right,
get this thing off at 8:30.
Enjoy the day, guys. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
See you, DB. Well, he'll be back tomorrow. Sam McKewon up next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes.
Every single day, be elite in every single area. So that is the whole core of what we try to do. What I love about Nebraska is it's literally written on the side of the stadium day by day. Like, that's the key. Like, so we talk about 42 years. It wasn't that we ran the ball, ran option, or played this defense. It was this mindset from Coach Osborne, Coach Devaney, from Coach Soul. It's like every little detail matters every single day. And so, like, we have to earn the right to even talk about playing. So, like, we have to go to training camp, and we have to every single day be elite in every single area. So that is the whole.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Varsity Radio with Andrew Rogers and Damon Benning.
I remember him throwing a overhand looping left, and he caught me right on the button. I think it was the first or the second round. And, I was just like, this is it? I was like, oh, okay. It's going to be a long night for him.
So I don't know if my buddy, we're about to get to Sam McKewon, don't worry, everybody out there. I don't know if my buddy was drinking too much zip line over the weekend.
Might have been.
Maybe had an Acres Ale on the golf course, maybe 2, maybe 3. I mean, they go down easy.
They do.
Rootless Nebraska corn. But he texted me and said, yo, I golfed the round of my life yesterday. We got to go this week and see if it was a fluke. It was a fluke.
Yeah.
And you had said it perfectly during the break. You don't ever see if it was a fluke if it wasn't a fluke.
Well, it's okay. By definition, the round of your life.
And he's listening right now, so you can go ahead and
this is.
now.
I don't know this person. I don't know what kind of golfer they are. But by definition, the round of your life is a fluke. That's why it stands out as the round of your life.
Oh, okay. So now he goes chill. Maybe I figured out. He put tie hole golf thing. I don't know. Maybe the whole golf thing. It was an 82 through 16. He put in asterisks. He said it hailed on hole 17 and we had to stop. So he didn't even finish.
So it wasn't even a full round of his life.
Right. The fluke wasn't even full.
I'm just saying.
Right.
Like even Tiger Woods has a fluky round of his life somewhere in there. Where he probably shot like a 55 or something somewhere.
And 9 holes or...
I'm just saying, at some point, Tiger Woods had the best round of his life, and it was also a fluke for Tiger Woods.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
Like, maybe you did figure something out. Like, congratulations.
Yeah,
but,
congratulations, RG. We will go golfing.
But then it wasn't the round of your life. That was just
to be a fluke.
The next round.
My best round when I shot a 30, I think it was a 37 on a par, not, oh, it was 9 holes. A 37 on 9 holes. Best round of my life.
Yeah.
It was a short round, but best round. Yeah, I went back to that golf course, didn't shoot a 37.
Yeah.
That just doesn't happen for guys like us.
That's not what we're about.
No. We're about having a good time, right? And getting frustrated. We went golfing in Gatlinburg.
Yeah.
And that course was really, really stinking nice. But I was like, is it $75 nice? Because that's what I paid to golf on the course.
Yeah.
And I'm like, maybe. But I also think they just, charged us
it's the
a little bit more
it's the tourist rate.
It's the Tory day and the Tory price.
Tour-y.
Yeah, Tour-y.
That did it have a good name? What was it called?
Yeah, you want to hear it?
Yeah.
Gatlinburg Golf Course.
Wildly creative.
I know. Yeah, I don't think,
I never would have thought of that.
I don't think anybody came close to guessing that.
I never would have thought of that.
What was the best hole?
The best hole was it's either 12 or 13. It was a big overlook hole.
Mm-hmm.
So you teed off way up
like
on
up
top
high?
of the mountain.
That's cool.
And it was like a 300-foot drop to the bottom.
Yeah.
And so you're 160 away, but I believe it said you're playing 125.
I was because of how dramatic the drop is. Yeah.
Right. So
those are kind of tricky, actually.
Yeah, it was a fun
because it messes with your kind of eye lines. And
it was
like
a fun course, but I mean that hole was insane, Shane, because where you teed off from, it was so open because you were so high up that all you saw was like the view from the back patio that I showed you earlier, where the house was at the top of the mountain. You just saw mountains for days.
Yeah.
Couldn't find a better hole. And that's the reason my brother chose that course too.
Well, it's because of that particular
of the one hole.
Yeah, that's super cool.
And
Sounds awesome.
I did not hit the green, if you guys were wondering.
I just assumed.
Yeah, thanks. That I hit the green, right?
Yeah.
We'll go
in
with,
like 3.
We'll go with that. Let's welcome in Sam McKewon now. Sam McKewon, sports editor at the Omaha World-Herald, at SW McKewon OWH on Twitter, or now the new black and white X, as we were just talking about during the break. Sam, good morning.
Good morning. How are you guys?
Good. How are you?
I'm happy. Training camp, rain again, more rain. Probably more rain this week. A lot of rain.
Hey, from a dad perspective, yeah, that is a great thing when you can get some rain, water the grass. I know our good friend Mike Sauter is a huge fan of the rain because he just likes to mow his grass 7 times a day. But aside from that, I just got back from vacation, Sam, catching up on a few things. Big Ten Media Days being one. Seems like the word to go around last week was elite. I heard that from Coach Fleck. I heard Coach Rhule say that at one point. I'm sure that I heard Coach Fickle at one point say it too. But where do you think Nebraska in particular has been the most elite this offseason in terms of development and becoming ready-made for the college football season?
I think probably the thing that they've probably improved the most is just their cultural setting. Like I think they all are on the same page. Whether or not they all agree with everything within the program, players said it. I think they're all on the same page. And honestly, what happens on Friday with the tight end coach resignation is in line with that. That wasn't good news, but it was reflective of sort of a universal standard among players and coaches. So I think they're on the same page. I don't really know much about what they did in the weight room or how they worked in 7-on-7 drills. So I couldn't speak much to that, but I can tell you that I think that there's real clarity in the program, and I think that's better than probably where they were for almost all of the Frost era. Like I think, and I kind of wrote about that today, that I don't know, Scott just didn't get his arms around it very well, and I think Rhule has gotten his arms around it quite well. And I think that'll pay dividends as time goes on.
Sam, I want to stick on the Wager thing here for a minute. It felt a little bit like it flew under the radar. It just happened kind of really quickly. I guess as far as you're kind of reporting on it, when did you start hearing there was something going on there versus when it actually went down as far as his resignation? Because I think between the citation for suspicion of DUI and his resignation, we're only talking about a couple days, right?
Yeah, I didn't hear anything. Transparency and reporting. I heard nothing. That's not surprising. I wasn't in Lincoln on Wednesday or Thursday, so yeah, I hadn't heard anything. So when I saw it, it came as a surprise to me. Now that said, it didn't come as a surprise that he resigned for that, because that seems in line to me with what Rhule has quickly established there, that would have made sense.
Sure.
And so yeah, but I didn't hear anything about it prior to.
Sam, how much of a setback do you envision there being at the tight end position with the news coming out about the resignation and with Wager? Do you think it's a minor bump in the road for this team, or do you believe it could carry over significant impact to the position group in the early parts of the season?
Minor bump in the road. I think he had not been on the job long enough to establish a long-term relationship with anybody but Ishmael Smith Flores, who played for him at Arlington Martin. So, obviously it's probably a tough deal for him, but for everybody else, I think it's a minor bump in the road. I'm sure that the transition from Becton to Wager was much larger than the transition from Wager to this Josh Martin, who is very experienced. I think he'll be able to walk into that room and he'll be able to say, like, look, guys, we're all going to miss Coach Wager, but here's my resume. And everybody will look at each other and say, yeah, this guy probably is fine. So I think they'll be fine. I think they're in great shape at that particular spot. It's worth remembering that the reason it opened up, the reason there was a tight end coaching job, is because Jake Keith backed out of coaching the quarterback, which means Marcus Satterfield coached the quarterback.
Great point.
And so I think the intention all along was for Satterfield to coach him until Keith backed out and decided to stay with the Rams. I think that's what he did. And so Wager was a recruiting hire. I don't know that he was. Now here we're going to go get the best tight end coach in the country. I don't think that's what was happening at all. And I also don't think he was joining the choir. And so I think sometimes you go to the well and you're like, here's what I want to do and here's my idea. And I don't really think that, Bob Wager was going to be joining the choir. So you sometimes you swing and you miss and then you move on. hindsight being 20/20, keeping Sean Beckman would have been probably the best thing to do, but they wanted to try something else. And they also thought Marcus Satterfield was going to coach the tight end. So, that was part of it. And Beckman was let go. So we'll see where it goes from there.
Sam, let's move to some on-field stuff here. Obviously, fall camp kicking off. I guess, what are you expecting in terms of things we'll be able to find out or think we maybe find out in terms of how much access and things like that before actually week 1 a month from today?
Well, I have like 3 or 4 access periods. One of them today, about a half hour. We won't learn much from those. And believe me, I would love to go to camp.
Mm-hmm.
That would be great. Once or twice a week and scrimmages and whatever. That would be, lovely. We did that during the Riley era and learned some things about the team. I think I have a pretty good idea of what it's going to look like from Nebraska's perspective. What we don't know yet is how that's going to look when it's on the field against an opponent. And Nebraska football is at this point where it doesn't really make any difference how they practice, how they play. And it matters how they practice in the way that it informs how they play. But it doesn't matter to, like, my eyes. Like, okay, they practice like this. This guy looked good in practice. This is what they did. I could tell you more about, like, their teaching points and who's looking good in camp. And I remember going to camp back in 2016. Guy Thomas had a big day. Oh, boy. And then he didn't play her. So, there's only so many things I can glean from that. And I'm not trying to disparage camp access. I would take it.
Yeah.
But I also know that, like, what really matters at this point is how they translate their practice into their performance. And here's the real thing. It may not matter that much this year. They may win some games this year, but their ultimate goal is to win a whole bunch of games. And that transition, that transformation may take multiple years. So there's a lot of work to do. And I don't know that, how much weekly practice will affect that. So we'll see what they do today. I think it'll be interesting, for sure, to see the new staff and the training camp environment. But I don't anticipate it being much different than it was, 3 months ago. It'll look like practice.
We're talking to Sam McKewon, sports editor at the Omaha World-Herald, at SW McKewon OWH on Twitter. Sam, stay right there, because if we are building, if that's the ultimate goal is, building for the first game against Minnesota, Minnesota's strengths. What disadvantages are Nebraska at right now via maybe the position groups you don't feel overly confident about that need to be to a certain degree or a certain point in order to match up well against Minnesota?
I think the wide receiver spot is, a question mark right now. I think the defensive line spot is a question mark. I think health at linebacker is a question mark. But I don't know. We'll see today if Nick Henrich is good to go. I don't know if he will be. That'll be something we're watching. If John Bullock can step in there. So I think there's those things. Tight end is still a question because you don't exactly know what the production is going to be. Certainly talent is very high. You got a 5-star and a high 4. And I think Smith Flores is going to be a good player. But, none of them have really played in Nebraska. Fedoni hasn't really played college football at all. Mm-hmm. So he's going to need some time to work and grow and all those things. So I mean, those are probably the positions. And then, shoot, let's see what the quarterback can do. I think Jeff Sims was a fine quarterback for a Georgia Tech team that didn't have a ton of talent. Jahmyr Gibbs was on that team for a couple of years, so he was good. But I think he's got something to prove too. You heard what he said at Big Ten Media Days. That, I'm an elite passer and a great runner. Well, if he feels that way, his career to this point has said he's good in those categories, but not great. And so if he's going to be great, this is the time to start being that. You know, like nobody has to talk about Casey Thompson. Casey Thompson's not here, and nobody's going to pretend that Harburg or Purdy's going to beat him out. That's not going to happen. So, you know, this is his team now. So one of the things we can watch a little bit over the next 3 or 4 weeks is how does he command the team, and what does he look like? Because this is the guy they're going to roll out there, and I think the expectations are he's going to be a top half of the Big Ten quarterback, and it's time to find out if he's going to be that.
Sam, I'm curious. You touched on something there, and there's a question I asked last week, kind of in a different way. But if Jeff Sims is a top half of the league quarterback, maybe even a little better. I know there's, after the top couple guys, in my opinion, there's some room for openings there. If he is a top half of the league type quarterback, what does that mean in terms of wins for Nebraska in your mind?
Well, you know, it probably means that, you know, he got some protection from the line, and it probably means that, you know, his receivers and running backs helped him out a little bit. So I think that probably puts them in the bowl territory. And of course, you know, what we think of as top half, and, you know, what the coaches envision as top half may be a little bit different.
Sure.
The coaches could say, hey, you know, this guy had a good year. He just didn't get he did not get a lot of help from X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
But I think if what we're talking about is that, you know, I think bowl contention, you know, I put you in that 6-win range. I mean, you know, Adrian Martinez was the top half of the Big Ten quarterback in 2021 for sure. Like he had a lot of good moments in 2021. He did. He didn't have them at the right time. He had some huge mistakes, but he had, overall, he had a good year. He played great in that Wisconsin game, you know, all that. But they went 3-9 because, you know, they found a way to lose a couple of games they probably shouldn't have lost. So, you know, those things can happen. Nebraska is 6-18 in games decided by a touchdown or less in the last 4 seasons, and they're 6-20 if you say one score or less. And that they didn't get there to that point by being a terrible team because they're within one score 26 times in 4 years. But they did get there by not being, you know, able to capitalize on key opportunities. If they had just gone, let's go to the 6-18 number again. If they had just gone 500 in those games, which isn't that good, if they had gone just 12-12, they would have went to a couple of bowl games.
Right.
That's Scott Frost is still the coach, folks. Because if they had gone to a couple of bowl games, right? If they go 7-5 in 2019, and then they go, I don't know, 6-6 or 7-5 last year, believe me, the powers that be keep Scott Frost in his job. He had to really screw it up for those people to turn their back and say, well, this isn't going to work anymore. And he did, you know, but that's what it took. They could have just been 500 the last 4 years, and he'd still have his job. And you know, he'd still have, and everybody around here, including most of the media, would be like, well, let the NIL have a chance to work, and let's give that a chance. And, you know, we've got to put $20 million into the collective so we can get the players that he needs. Notice nobody's saying that. They got a collective, and the collective's doing a great job, but there's not a person, including Matt Rhule, who's saying, boy, let me tell you, you know, let's put, well, we need all the money we can get for that NIL collective. No one is saying that associated with Nebraska football. And the reason they're not saying that is, A, they don't believe that that's the key to everything. Not necessarily. And B, that there's the balance of power is not there. Like, if Frost were still the coach, you'd hear nothing but NIL. But I think with Rhule, it's like, no, it's going to be the culture. And yeah, we want NIL. We want to be able to, you know, we want players here who want to be here and also are able to enjoy NIL. But we're not going to rely on that the way that we would have if Frost was still there.
All right, Sam, we know that this team is staying in the dorms for fall camp. They're sharing rooms. They're pairing up with one another. If Sam McKewon were sharing a room with a player on the team, and you got to pick your player for a week, who are you most fascinated by that you could write about for a week because you got to share a room with them?
Great question. Neat question. Well, it'd probably have to be somebody whose personality I like. Malcolm Hartzog. I feel like he has a really interesting just life story, and I think he's a hell of a football player. I think he's one of the 5 best players on the team. So, I'd want to pick his brain about how he got to be who he is. I think that would be, pretty high on my list. On the defensive side of the ball, Ethan Piper's a cool dude. Like that, he'd be a cool
100%.
guy. I mean, he's really a well-rounded person. He's not just football. He can talk about almost anything. And so, I think Ethan Piper is a really interesting guy who you could just talk to anything about. It could be movies or books or politics. I'm guessing Ethan Piper's thought about all of it, and so he would be a good, interesting guy to talk to just about the world. There's very interesting guys on the team, but Hartzog, Piper. I think this fullback that they got from this transfer from Notre Dame is going to be pretty important eventually. So he'd be an interesting guy to get to know. Barrett Liebentrick.
Sam, if I asked you the same question but with coaching staff, let's take Matt Rhule out of it. What assistant are you spending a week with and getting the most out of?
Another good question. If Rayolo was forced to talk to you, he would be interesting.
That is true.
He's the one that you don't know that well because he kind of keeps things close to the vest. Of all the ones that I think would be the most interesting, I'd probably Terrence Knighton, who's talking tomorrow, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think Terrence Knighton's a pretty interesting guy. And, you always want to know what the coach, the position coach of the second most important position on the team, what that guy's like. The most important position is quarterback, and that's Marcus Satterfield. And but the offensive line is enormously important. So knowing how that guy ticks would be interesting to me, and so at night.
Sam, quickly here, got about 40 seconds. Your fall camp emergers on the offensive and defensive side of the ball.
Good question. Liebertritt, the fullback. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I think just the continued growth of Bullock is something to watch. I think he'll obviously continue to surge. Those two.
Sam, we appreciate you, man. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you next Monday.
All right, take care.
That's Sam McKewon, one of the best sports editor at the Omaha World-Herald, at SW McKewon, OWH on Twitter. Who would you spend a week with? Just to spend a week with, because we don't have to write about them, so we're at least at that luxury. We can talk about them later on.
The guy I was thinking of was Terrence Knighton.
Okay.
The same as Sam.
Okay. I would choose Evan Cooper.
Okay.
Let's talk about the player, though, next.
All right.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 5 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
Welcome back. Coffee and Cream in the morning on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Currency. Ravi, Lulla, Shane Schillerberg, Andrew Rogers. Wait for it. Now we can begin again. We're having some fun here on a Monday. The rain has stopped outside, but we will not stop raining on your parades out there. I tried to tie something
I don't think that worked. You didn't
what
land
would you
that
give
one.
me out of 10?
I mean, the transition was okay. I think
Give me a 3.
I think the sentiment was not great because we don't want to rain on people's parades.
That's not true. Sometimes I do.
Well, I'm trying not to. I'll give it a 4. I'll give it a 4 out of 10.
Oh, 4. That was better than I thought. So I'll take that. I think that's a dub. I'll take the W there. Speaking of W's, that interview with Sam McKewon was a for sure W. And on the back end of that, I weaving in some more fun hypothetical questions. Oh, Thomas, 2 out of 10. You are not my friend anymore. CK, go kick rocks.
Harsh critics out there.
Go back to class. You should be in class right now. So we were talking about sharing a room with a coach, a player, and only for a week. It's not for the whole month, just for a week. Who are you fascinated by that you'd want to spend some time with? And right before the break, we both said a coach. You had said who? Knighton as well?
Yeah, Knighton was the guy I thought of when I asked Sam about it. I would want to spend a week with that guy.
And I said Evan Cooper because I would love to get into his recruiting brain. You know, I like seeing how coaches value high school athletes and, you know, where they put them on a certain scale and why they're a good fit and why not. So those type of questions I'd like answered. So that's why I choose Evan Cooper. Garrett McGuire would be a close second. We could just really bond.
Well, yeah. And he's in a really unique situation. So,
yes, sir.
To me, that's part of the.
And I'm sure his dad could come visit one day. So then I get the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
I get both McGuires.
It's just a really interesting dynamic because of, I know people have made a lot about his age, but like it is a little unusual for somebody that young to be a full-time position coach. So that would be really interesting to talk about. I remember when I first started coaching college basketball, I was 24, 25. And because of the nature of some of the teams we put together, there were 2 years where there were players that were older than I was. And so like the dynamic can be really strange when there's not like an age gap there. So it'd be interesting to talk about Garrett McGuire with that.
Now, did you think you could relate, before we get to the prompt, did you think you could relate more with those players because you were around the same age, or did you find it harder to kind of be the authority figure around them?
It was easier to relate. It was harder to like discipline.
So it was kind of both.
Yeah,
it was a shared thing.
Yeah. So the relationships were really good. I mean,
Which one was harder?
Honestly, it was probably harder to do the authority discipline part of it. Just because that's not typically where my comfort level was coaching anyway. And so when I was basically a peer with the players, like that made it really challenging. And I'm curious, like, maybe Garrett McGuire faces that. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe like those are some of the things I'd be curious about with the age thing, because he is basically the same age, or I think he might be younger than a couple of the guys. So that part to me is really it's just an interesting dynamic.
Okay, so now as we talk players here, who would you like to share a room with? If you were roommates with a player for a week during fall camp, we'll say it's the first week because you know everybody's trying to get settled in, and it makes more sense to do it during the first week than say like week 3 when everyone's like, maybe
they're over on the dorm life.
First off, like for one, I mean, maybe you're looking at it from the stance of who's bringing the best fan, because I saw Nebraska posted over the weekend a photo of, you know, a grouping of 3 players coming in to the dorms with fans. One had like a newer looking, like a slim fan.
Yeah, like a blade fan.
Yeah, and it would just kind of, you
oscillate.
know, go back and forth. The other one had more of like a jet turbine, which I think, if I'm correct, that was our friend on the offensive line. And then the other one was just a box fan.
Like an old school box fan?
Yeah, an old school box fan. So I'm like, man, maybe I'm picking my player based on what fan's in the room, because like, are we going to – it's going to be comfortable if I have the jet turbine.
It's true. It's true.
But I don't know. Like it comes down to then the personality of the player. So I'm interested for you. Who would you be sharing a room with?
Yeah, so on the offensive side of the ball, and I think I'm just kind of fascinated by his story, I think I'd go Xavier Betts. Obviously, there's just been a lot there in the last year, 18 months with him and not being part of the team, coming back with Matt Rhule, getting the 21 credit hours in last spring to be eligible and everything. I would just be really interested to like talk to him and get to know him a little bit better, and kind of understand him as a person, because I think there's a lot there that's really interesting. Just, you know, talking to DB about it a little bit because he knows him pretty well. Xavier Betts seems like a fascinating guy to me, and I think I'd be really interested in just learning about his life and kind of what the last 18 months, 2 years have been like for him.
Yeah, Betts was on my radar for a possibility because I was looking at it from like a stance of, okay, young guys on the team. Betts' story is super unique. It pains me not to pick a kicker because I love kickers. Tristan Alvano would have been a close second there.
Sure. Yeah.
So as I kind of looked at from like a local high school perspective, like those were a couple of names that popped up in my brain. But somebody that I've always had a strong attachment to is Gabe Ervin Jr.
Okay, sure.
And the reason for that is, he comes out of Georgia, highly recruited, highly touted, starts as a true freshman, gets hurt a few weeks into the season, and now this injury is one that puts him out for good. So he has the ACL injury, goes into the offseason. Now I kind of want to learn, like, okay, how'd you retool your brain from being the guy to now being the ultimate teammate to now coming back and most people don't look at it as a benefit by doing that. But now you've been able on the inside to just fire up that competitor within you to not only win your job back, but you also shared the duty of being the ultimate teammate. So you're kind of like the ultimate player on this team now.
Potentially, yeah.
Because you know what it's like on both sides of the white. You're either behind the big, thick stripe.
Sure.
And you are cheering on your team, or you're on it.
Yeah.
And you are being productive for your team. So I'd be really curious to learn about how he overcame those internal battles.
Sure, yeah. And really any guy that's had a year-long injury is really fascinating to me because obviously you've got the physical toll that it takes on you, but really any kind of redshirt. If you've talked to any guy that's redshirted in mostly basketball and football in terms of my experience, but those guys find it so mentally challenging because it's the first time in their lives that they've gone through a season and just not played. Obviously they're still practicing and stuff like that, but most guys, they get up for the games. Like that's the thing that like gets them through practices and gets them through workouts and stuff like that. And so the mental and emotional challenge for guys, whether sitting out, whether it's for injury or just for a regular redshirt purpose, those guys always fascinate me because people process that so differently. And I find that really, really interesting. I think you can get a lot of insight into people based on how they process a year off, a redshirt year, injury year, whatever. So Gabe Ervin would be good for that purposes as well. The other guy that I was thinking, this on the defensive side of the ball, I'm really fascinated by MJ Sherman.
Hey, same.
And
that would have been my pick just because I just like his personality.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think he's a really interesting personality, but the other thing is, like, okay, he's seen greatness. He was there up close and personal, right? And I just want to like ask him questions about, hey, like obviously Nebraska and Georgia are in different places in the development of their program, right? But I'm curious if
I would love to know the Kirby Smart system.
I'm curious if there's like commonalities between like the way things are run. I'm just curious about a lot of the comparisons there. And so I think MJ Sherman would be a really good guy to spend time with. And like you said, he just seems like a really interesting, fun guy to spend time with. So besides the, the probing questions and things like that, I think you would just have a good time hanging out with him as well.
Man, you took that out of my mouth. If I had I'll pivot. If I could change, Quentin Newsom would be just a guy for me.
That's a guy I looked at.
And a reason I guess the only reason here why I'd really like to know more about him was he's been a part of so many coaching changes, and he's a Sunday guy.
Yeah.
So I'd like to know the Sunday guy before he's a Sunday guy.
Of course, yeah.
Selfishly.
Well, absolutely.
Neither one of you guys are taking Omar?
That's your guy,
That's
Shane.
your guy.
I'm not
we didn't want to take your take your bunk with Omar.
How awesome would that be to spend a week with Omar? I mean,
all you would do is mic him up so you just drop days.
I would have him narrate my life story.
Yikes. Shane. Omar,
how sweet would that be?
Omar wouldn't have fun doing that.
Shane went to the comic book store again.
It'd be a short read.
Shane showed up at work again. It would be a short read. Nice pun there. Way to go, Shane. Take a short break.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes.
Ain't nothing new. Saying like nah. Say it again, my bad. Man.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
Welcome back. Coffee and Cream in the morning on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Currency. Ravi, Lulla, Andrew Rogers. Happy to have you with us. 590 ESPN Radio in Omaha, live on Twitter, live on YouTube. We appreciate all your comments in there, except for PK, who apparently has no class today. Andy called me Ruru because that is, well, let's just say my niece still can't say Andrew. So, well, I think she can, but it's kind of embedded in her brain now to call me
Uncle Ruru.
But I think it's actually woo woo. But it became, I think it just became Ruru out of nowhere. But we'll count it. It's cool. Why not?
It's all good.
Why not?
It's all good. It's all good.
As before we move any further, I'll take a moment and tell you about the Omaha Storm Chasers. The Storm Chasers are having a better year than the Royals.
Well, they just sent away a favorite son of both the Storm Chasers and the Royals, Nicky Lopez.
Yep.
Traded him to the Braves.
Well, it is MLB trade deadline day.
It's deadline day.
Oh yeah, August 1st is the deadline. Wow.
Well, I think it's today. It's July 31st and then August 31st is the waiver deadline. I think it's like 6 p.m. today is the deadline.
All right. So there it is. See, when I'm on vacation, dude, I lose track. I just lose track of everything. And I was so worried about the Cardinals talking about potentially trading Nolan Arenado that I was just like, nah. Nah.
Yeah, you don't really want to be real dialed in for that one. For if they're trading Arenado. Nobody needs that.
Saying like nah, like nah.
Nope.
You guys lost
means nope.
Oh no, you're right. It's tomorrow. It's 5 p.m. our time tomorrow.
See, I'm not that dumb, right?
It used to always be July 31st.
Say it again, my bad.
Thank you, bud.
Man.
So you guys, your Cardinals lost quite a few games to the Cubs recently.
Thanks for reminding me. The Red Sox did come back yesterday.
We were talking about the last week you were here, so a week and a half ago at this point, how maybe they could make a push. The Cardinals, they were only 11.5 back at that point.
Still only 11.
How are you feeling now?
Not great.
How about
less
them apples?
Optimistic?
Definitely less optimistic, but that's not to say that the Cardinals are out by any means either, because being only 11 back is still pretty amazing for a team that's only won 47, 48 games.
Yeah, that's not great.
But the leader only has 58.
The division
Reds have 58 wins. That's it.
The division is not ideal.
No.
Being in last place is tough. Yeah, I don't know, man. Are they selling? Do you think they're selling or standing pat? Because they're not buying, right?
No, so they're selling right now.
Yeah.
And so the last two trades kind of foresee the selling point of view. So they got rid of Montgomery.
Okay.
And they got rid of Jordan Hicks.
Yep.
But in return, they got, I think it was 4 top 30 prospects out of those respective organizations.
Sure.
And all that really does is allow you to make moves in the offseason because you're building depth via young players. And now it's not going to hurt your farm system if you were to deal some, whether they are the ones you've been developing all along, like Mason Wynn, or if it's some of these other pickups that you got from these teams. For example, I believe, and I'm trying to remember correctly because both trades have me questioning my numbers, but I believe in the Jordan Hicks trade, they got the Blue Jays' 7th best prospect.
Okay.
So by getting a guy like him, it was like they got the 7th from there. They got Texas's 13th and 17th, whatever it was. But because of those type of deals, now you can go into the offseason, get a free agent signing for one, or make a trade and know that you have a lot of other options to fill. Like it's like buy and replace.
Sure.
Essentially what that is.
Sure.
So I'm okay with the Cardinals' moves. It seems like Texas is going all in by getting Scherzer and Montgomery.
Yeah.
So good on them. I'd be
and pitching is what they needed. So they're off because their offense is great.
Man, I should know this, and I think I'm right when I say it. But is Texas one of the teams that still doesn't have a World Series?
Yes, the Rangers don't have a World Series.
Right.
The closest they came was against the Cardinals in.
How'd that fare?
It didn't not well. It was really good until David Freese started doing some stuff.
And until Nelson Cruz tried to catch a fly ball in right field.
Well, there's a preponderance of events that happened.
Selfish.
But, yeah, they don't have a World Series. The Mariners. I'm trying to think who else. Those are the two big ones that I have got off the top of my head. But I really like Jordan Hicks because he's a type 1 diabetic like me. So I was.
I thought you were going to say you also throw 103 miles.
I do not. I do not throw 103 mile an hour fastball. Like maybe 73 if I got warmed up.
I'd love to see it. Let's pull the radar gun out now.
A couple years ago, I went to this thing and I got up to like 69. So like if I worked up to it, 73 is like not out of the question. I'm in the neighborhood. At least that was a couple years ago. Who knows? I don't know how
you got up to 69 and now you're giving yourself 4 miles per hour because of what, age?
No, because all my pickleballs made my elbow and shoulder stronger.
Yeah, I don't think that's how that works. I don't think pickleball is really strengthening your speed.
I'm counting on a generous gun is what I'm doing. So.
Okay. Now we're talking about guns.
Well, radar guns.
Oh, okay.
because there's some of those ballparks where you're like, this guy's not throwing 102. Get out of here. I've seen one of those generous ballpark radar guns. I'll be all right.
So there's a lot to still digest during this deadline period. The Angels acquired Randall Grichuk and CJ Cron from the Rockies. Not exactly guys that move the needle.
No.
Seems like a total Angels move to just make a move for
the sake.
Irrelevance.
Yeah.
Now, that's not knocking Grichuk. He was a former Cardinal, and he's been a nice role player for the Rockies.
Sure.
CJ Cron can rake when he wants to. But what are we doing? Like, we're not trying to grab guys that are just so just to plug and play. We need to get a superstar to pair with these guys on this team.
Yeah.
Start making better deals.
And I don't know. They're what? They're 4 games over 500. They're 5 games out of first in the AL West. I think they're 4 games out of the wild card, out of the second wild card spot. So, I mean, they've got work to do if they're making a playoff push. And if they have any hope of keeping Ohtani, they really need to make a playoff push. So this feels like a very lukewarm move and like, hey, we want to get maybe a little bit better so we could maybe make the playoffs. But like you said, they don't really move the needle to the fact where you're like, oh, they've clearly gone all in on trying to be a contender with Trout and Ohtani. So that's where it feels like they're not really committed one way or the other. If you're not going to commit to being a contender with him this year, just get rid of him. Like, honestly, I mean, really, if send him out and get something back, because they're in a position where if they don't get something done,
they won't, though.
They won't, but if they don't get something done and if they don't make a real playoff push, they're just going to lose him for nothing. Mm-hmm. And I know that baseball teams don't operate.
Maybe.
Probably. I think so. I think if they don't make a playoff run this year, or if they don't make the playoffs this year, that he is moving on. That's my belief. I don't know that, obviously, but it really feels like they need to operate a little bit more like NBA teams do, where NBA teams will not lose an asset for nothing. And it seems like in baseball, sometimes these guys just walk away and nobody's, I mean, you get like compensation picks, but who cares? It's Ohtani. Compensation picks isn't really, even if you're trading for like 40 cents on the dollar, the compensation,
you can get 2 top prospects. In a team's
the compensation pick is like a half penny on the dollar. Not ideal, right? So I don't know. I think they need to either, poop or get off the pot if you're the Angels here, and it doesn't seem
well. And the big worry for teams out there is, am I going to spend that much?
Yeah, will he resign?
If he doesn't resign, because that
which
was
is
the big
why
thing
you
with Scherzer.
Only get 40 cents on the dollar instead of full value, because you don't have any assurances, right?
So that was the big thing with Scherzer, was when Texas made that deal, they guaranteed themselves a re-signing of Max Scherzer by giving up a prospect that the Mets wanted. So by giving up the guy that they ended up wanting, they guaranteed in that deal that Scherzer would re-sign next year.
Yes.
And so that's what that's what
the complicating factor.
The Angels and other teams just can't do, because they know Ohtani's going to want an insane amount of money because he deserves that chunk of change.
Yeah.
And if you look right now in the standings, the Angels are 4 games back of the wild card. They're 5 games back of the division. They still have some work to be done. It's not like they sit pretty. So that's another reason why I'm like, why are we choosing the Rockies to go pluck players from?
And
let's go somewhere else.
They're not going to pass the Rays in terms of a wild card. I mean, either Rays or the Orioles, whichever one of those ends up in first or second in the East. I don't believe they're going to pass the Blue Jays. I don't think they're going to pass the Astros. So you got 3 teams in front of you that I don't think you're leapfrogging the way you're currently constructed. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Now, granted, I don't know who's in their farm system. I don't know who
I'm not going
to be dealt.
Yeah.
That's not something I dive
I'm not going to pretend like I deep dive on every team's farm system,
but yeah, there are plenty of options out there.
There's plenty of prospects to be had and plenty of options to explore, and it just seems like the Angels are content with not really doing any of it and just grabbing a couple of, like you said, non-needle moving pieces to make it look like they're making a push, and they're really not.
Yeah. Well, okay, we have to take a quick turn and go left again and talk college football with Bill Bender after the break. Still a lot to get to just across the Big Ten, and he can kind of cover everything, and then we'll even dive deeper into some of the other big conferences. We'll take a break. We'll do that. We have the sports cleanup where we can come back to a lot of these thoughts, and then we'll talk boxing and UFC to close the show. But Bill Bender up next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream on Hail Varsity Radio with Andrew Rogers and Damon Benning.
First of all, it's great to be here, so thank you guys all for being here and covering Nebraska football. I want to make sure I begin by thanking Tony Petitti and the entire Big Ten Conference in my short amount of time. It's been first class, and all the other coaches have been amazing. I want to thank Trev Alberts, who's here with us. I appreciate him giving me this job and giving me this great opportunity. And I want to make sure I thank everyone back home, everyone in Nebraska. It's been an amazing 6 months, and excited to get to the season.
It's Coach Matt Rhule. Coffee and Cream in the morning on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Currency. Ravi, Lulla, Andrew Rogers, happy to have you with us. We'll make sure to get to your thoughts on YouTube, your questions during the sports cleanup at 9:30. We have a couple that have trickled in. We will dive deeper into the MLB trade deadline and more on this Husker football team. But before we do any of that, I'd like to welcome in Bill Bender, national writer for Sporting News, at Bill Bender 92 on Twitter. He was at Big Ten Media Days. Bill, good morning.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thanks for taking the time. I'll start with this because we haven't gotten to it yet, and I'm not sure how much Ravi and his platoon of co-hosts covered last week, but since the end of last season, it seems like Michigan is the school that's always in the news for the wrong reasons. And I don't know if that's just it comes with the territory, but first it was Matt Weiss, and now it's Harbaugh misleading the NCAA. With all the baggage, you'd think suspending more than 4 games should be the necessary punishment, yet it was an agreed upon punishment, which is weird to me, because at what status do you have to be to agree upon a suspension with your governing power? I mean, that just seems hysterically unbelievable to me.
This whole case seems unbelievable, honestly. I don't think he should be suspended at all. But I get why he is. If he misled the investigators, I understand all that. The offense versus the state of college football now, and it's just, as I wrote, I mean, I don't think this suspension is going to have the intended consequences for the NCAA. I don't think it's going to have the intended consequences for Michigan, because they're not going to lose one of those first 4 games, but fail to win the Big Ten and fail to go to the college football playoff and all those things, then this is going to be looked at as, like you said, an offseason full of distractions that stalled the momentum the program has built.
Bill, let's stay with you got me. Oh, there we go.
There he is.
Bill, let's stay with Michigan. Sorry about that.
You kind of heard him as an echo there for a hot sec. Huh?
Let's stay with Michigan for a second here, but move on to the field. It seems like this is a really big year in the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry in terms of jockeying for Big Ten supremacy. Is it in your view that if Michigan wins against Ohio State again, that maybe they will have kind of fully supplanted the Buckeyes as the king of the Big Ten?
I mean, as you guys know, I'm in Central Ohio, and I would say the mood here is uncomfortable for the first time in this century, really, where Michigan has a chance to beat them 3 times for the first time since 95 to 97. Mm-hmm. And Michigan has a chance to, just the talk around Ryan Day here. I mean, he's 45-6. There's not too many coaches that will 45-6, but losses are to Michigan the last 2 years. I think I would draw, and I'd have to go back and look, but I imagine it was like that at Nebraska at once upon a time, when if Tom Osborne had won 40 games but only had the 2 losses to Oklahoma.
Sure. Yeah.
In comparison.
Bill, as you were kind of listening to all of those coaches at the podium, I mean, something that kind of stuck out to me, or at least what I do is I like to just think, okay, who impressed me the most, right? And, believe it or not, I think Coach Braun impressed me a lot by being able to stand up there and, with every allegation that's on the line and let's call it a havoc of a role that he had to step into over at Northwestern. How much did he impress you just in regards to handling that situation going on at Northwestern?
I mean, it can't be easy. I mean, he obviously had a long opening statement, long, slow, deliberate, because there's so many questions you can answer. So, yeah, I mean, given the deck of cards or hand or however you want to phrase it that he was given, yeah, he handled it more than well. And we'll see where that goes from here. I think it's going to be a very rough year at Northwestern. I will be surprised if any of those coaches are still on staff next year. And, you know, the athletic department's been shaken up. It's gone to other sports, and it's probably not going to be a pretty year on the field. So all of those things lead me to believe that, yeah, he did what he can. He's from North Dakota State. That's a winning program with a winning culture, and we'll see how he does. But, yeah, not an easy job for him. And apparently, you know, like his wife's pregnant too. It just can't be easy.
Bill, let's talk about the Big Ten West here for a minute. It seems, I mean, outside of Northwestern, pretty wide open in the last year of the division. How are you sizing things up? I mean, Iowa seems like the safe choice. Wisconsin kind of seems like the sexy choice. Illinois, maybe the sleeper choice. How are you personally looking at this division? Or are you just like, hey, there's 4 teams that could win this thing. I don't know who's going to take it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I tend to lean toward Wisconsin and Iowa first. I mean, because they're the ones that are typically there. I do think Wisconsin with Luke Fickell, it has a ton of talent. I don't know what the transformation of the offense is going to look like, but I do know they're going to be pretty good. Like you said, though, after that, Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota. Minnesota's an interesting sleeper. Illinois and Purdue played for the division last year. So any one of those 6 teams, that's how wide open this division is.
Bill, after how last season panned out, who's your way too early Big Ten success story this year? It doesn't have to be a jump from the bottom. I'll even allow they weren't in the college football playoff last year, and if they are this year, that counts too toward the type of progress I'm looking for with this question.
Well, I mean, if Minnesota wins the division, but for them, the key is 3-3 against Wisconsin under Fleck, haven't beat Iowa yet. So for Minnesota to have a successful season, I think they've got to get to Indy. They've yet to do that. I think it could be a conference-wide at large kind of prediction. Sporting news, we have Ohio State, Michigan going back to the playoff, and we also have USC in the playoff, which, of course, they're joining the Big Ten. So you can imagine the stories if the Big Ten has, quote-unquote, 3 teams in the playoff, all of them taking aim probably at who I think is going to be Georgia at the end of the road.
Bill, I want to stay with the college football playoff here for a second. Are there some teams, I know I've seen a few previews that are high on, like Florida State, for example, with Jordan Travis returning. Got some returners on defense like Jared Verse as well, who could have gone in the first round this year as a rusher or as a defensive pass rusher. Is there a team that you look at as, you know, obviously not a TCU necessarily, because that really came off the radar, but somebody outside of Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State? I mean, you mentioned USC. Anybody else that you're looking at as that maybe they've got a kind of a dark horse shot at the college football playoff?
Sure. I mean, that's the question you get all year. So TCU created content for all of us, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going. I get that question quite a bit. So, but I mean, define that like in terms of, okay, a couple teams that could make the playoff for the first time, Penn State and Tennessee, but they're not. If either one of those schools did it, we wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, that was a crazy run. I think Oregon State's a very interesting team. That's off the radar that won 10 games last year. And a team that would fit this like kind of TCU question would be Texas A&M. If they went from 5-7, the Bobby Petrino marriage is perfect.
Sure.
Their 5-star quarterback balls out, and Jimbo goes to the playoff. But I still don't think that qualifies as, you know what I mean? Like Texas A&M a little bit more well-known than TCU was last year.
Sure. Well, and they've got, you know, Texas A&M has got the talent. They were disappointing to finish the way they did last year, whereas I don't know that you look at TCU last year and say, yeah, that's they've got playoff level talent. You probably could say that about A&M.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When you have that kind of recruiting that they've had and guys like Evan Stewart and Reuben Owens that have 5-star tags, they could be that team. Another school I'm very interested in, I don't know if it's, I'm not saying playoff, but just to watch and see what the flip is. I really like the Jeff Brom hire at Louisville, a former player there. Got a lot of guys in the transfer portal. Kind of the same as same deal as TCU, where he's bringing in all these guys. And Sonny fit at TCU.
Mm-hmm.
Fit always matters to me. And Braum obviously fits at Louisville. They could flip that in a hurry.
So as you look at fit, take it from the local example here. How much of a fit do you think Matt Rhule is for this Husker football team?
Well, you want to talk about guys that I was impressed with Big Ten Media Day. Matt Rhule would be at the top of my list. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on Hail Varsity. Though trying to get a couple of Twitter followers. No,
that's Bill Bender 92.
Right. No, he was very impressive because I think it's just, as he said, a self-described football junkie, exactly what Nebraska needs in terms of a little bit of a makeover type facelift. And man, he's the guy for it. He did it at Temple. He did it at Baylor. And as he emphasized, it's not the same thing at Nebraska, but just his passion, the way he came across. And I had heard from I talked to some Nebraska writers while I was there. I heard this was going to be the case, where he was going to be a guy that wins you over at the podium. I'm sure you guys have talked about it. The difference will be, can they win it on the field in these one-score games that have haunted them for the past couple years?
Bill, is there anyone else? I mean, there's a couple other new coaches in the league as well, Ryan Walters, Luke Fickell. Is there any other guys, whether new or old, that you were, I don't know if surprised by, but that kind of won you over in the press conference besides Rhule?
I mean, Luke Fickell's the other one. And I've been around Luke for a while, and I know his way, and just very impressed with how some of us were surprised that he took that job, but not in a bad way, just, okay, that's the job he wanted. And, Wisconsin obviously has the resources to be a playoff team and a national championship caliber team. And he promised reporters that, it's going to look different than what you're used to. But this is a guy that took Cincinnati to the playoffs, developed the NFL talent the way he did there. If Matt Rhule gets Nebraska going and Luke Fickell gets Wisconsin going, then you get USC coming in, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State. That's 7 legitimate, blue blood programs at once. And the prospects of that, it's going to make the Big Ten awesome here in a year.
Bill, as we talk about new coaches, I think of new quarterbacks as well. Lots of them in the Big Ten, but I kind of want to take a big, a jump to the college football landscape here. Which newly led quarterback team that has normally showcased themselves in the college football playoff, or at least have gotten close, has the best chance of not returning because of their new signal caller? Would you think it's Georgia, Alabama, or Ohio State?
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State should be fine with McCord. It's not going to change the way that they do things. Georgia, did you say Alabama in there?
I did. I said Alabama and Georgia.
Okay, so of the three, I mean, Alabama's the biggest question mark, which normally they're the least questioned team because we need to see what Buckner can do, what potentially Jalen Milroe can do, although we've seen him in a limited sample. I don't think Georgia or Ohio State is going to change much. Now, and granted, Bennett and Stroud are NFL quarterbacks, and they played well, but I think within the system and what they try to do and the talent around them, Carson Beck and Kyle McCord will be fine. Alabama's the one that people are off of a little bit. And the fact that, Buckner didn't win the Notre Dame job and he's going to Alabama and he might start. I mean, these are things I didn't think I was going to say.
Bill, I'm curious as we, kind of weaving in a couple of the things that have caught my attention while we've been talking here, both new coaches, and you mentioned guys like Jeff Brom who are taking giant transfer roster changes. Obviously, no one did that more than Deion Sanders at Colorado. That's somebody that Nebraska has on their schedule, so it's of particular interest around here. But how hard is it to figure out? I mean, the Colorado thing is sort of unprecedented in terms of just volume. How do you look at a team like that and start to figure out any idea of what you think they're going to be?
Well, Colorado people are going to, what people don't do on social media and they're going to have to do is be patient. I mean, they won one game.
Yeah.
But if you look, Colorado's won off the field despite all the transfers. There's no question. They were on ESPN for their spring game. They are going to the Big 12, which they should have never left. I mean, that's another topic for another radio hit with you guys. But they definitely have increased visibility, and it's going to take time. I mean, if Deion is there for 5 to 6 years, I think they'll be competitive. But people's visions of this are everything from total dumpster fire to the reincarnation of the Miami Hurricanes in the 1980s. And I'm like, neither one of those things is probably going to happen. They'll probably just get better. And if Colorado went 4-8 this year, as hard as this sounds, that would be a win for me and a win for them. I mean, they got better and they recruit better and they don't lose as many guys in the transfer portal. And that would probably mean Shedeur Sanders was pretty good.
We're chatting with Bill Bender, national writer for Sporting News at BillBender92 on Twitter. Bill, we've seen how today's NFL hasn't been too nice to running backs. You know, Michelle retiring over the weekend, Jonathan Taylor, requesting a trade, conferences about, the pay of running backs. How do you think that impacts college football runners' thoughts to possibly return to college knowing they can get good NIL money over going into what now looks like a short-lived league for veteran running backs?
Yeah, Blake Corum was asked about that last week, and Blake's obviously, a star running back at college level. He's doing well with NIL. I mean, he was dressed nicely. I had blue velvet crushed velvet suit. I don't have one of those. He definitely, but yes, there's still time. But opinion on it. But he said, I'm not in the NFL yet. But it's frustrating for Saquon Barkley, and this Jonathan Taylor story is taking some very bizarre turns. So, I mean, one of the solutions I've always had, and they're a little off the wall. One, I think college running backs, I always said, like, maybe you let them enter the NFL draft a year early, but that would create all kinds of concerns. I've also thought that, and it's not as much a problem now, that college running backs should be on a pitch count. Like, they shouldn't have more than 350 carries a year, maybe even 300. And I also think that they should be able to get paid sooner because of their clock in the NFL. But none of these things are going to happen. So it's definitely – I see both sides of the argument, though, because if I was an NFL GM, I would do it exactly how they're doing it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because, I mean, obviously with a hard salary cap, there's not a lot of wiggle room if you value other positions more highly. I guess, do you see long-term, and this is more of an existential question, I guess, for running backs, but do you see maybe long-term that we see a kind of a deterioration at the position because the guys that would be playing it want to play a position that's more lucrative to them, whether it's, on the defensive side of the ball, maybe moving positions on offense? Do you see that as a possibility, yes, long-term, that just we don't get the same level of quality running backs because the really good guys don't want to be in that spot?
Well, maybe. But, I mean, the running backs still touch the football, and running backs still are a huge part of the college game. And, again, Bijan Robinson, first-round pick, and that was good. I think he was a first-round pick. Yeah, he was. So that was good for the position. That it's still an important position. I do think they need to explore ways to allow them to get paid more early. And NIL helps. Like I said, Blake Corum, you'd think in theory he didn't have to come back. But coming off that major knee injury and some of the things he's doing, and it also helps with a guy like Blake Corum that he's going to share with Donovan Edwards this season. It's always good to have multiple running backs in the backfield, especially at the college level.
Bill, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks for hopping on the show. We will talk to you again soon.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me on. Take care.
You too. Bill Bender, national writer for Sporting News at BillBender92 on Twitter. Lots of interesting stuff there. Kind of bounced around all over the place, but
I do wonder about the running back spot in college. Because
that thing has always intrigued me because I've known for a while that this is the way the league was trending. It used to be, hey, they can last a long time. And now it's turned into, well, no, they really can't. And teams would rather take a young kid, whether he's in the 4th or 5th round of a draft, rather than say, hey, unless he's like a Christian McCaffrey out there who can he's like a multi-purpose back.
Right. You can line Christian McCaffrey up in the slot. You can line Christian McCaffrey up anywhere.
You look at Saquon Barkley, who was taken 2nd in that draft, and you are thinking, what? There's no reason this guy shouldn't be signed. Now, his injury history and, things come into question there.
Well, and where it comes down
but he's healthy right now.
Yeah.
And that's the issue.
So what it comes down to, right, is they look at the economics and they say, and Damon and I actually talked about this on the podcast last week, that this isn't really a new phenomenon. It's new in that the high-end guys aren't getting paid, but if you weren't a high-end guy for a really long time, the middle-class running backs haven't got paid for 25 years. Now, the difference is the high-end guys aren't getting paid now, but you look at it and you go, okay, if I can get 70% of the production, which you can probably get from most, like if you find the right guy in the draft, you can get 70% production of most guys, right? And you're paying for 10% of the salary,
right?
Then economically that makes sense to you, right? Because then you can put that 90% towards a quarterback or a defensive end or a cover corner or some position, a wide out, a number one wide out, a position where you can't replace 70% of their production with 10% of the cost. It's unfortunate for running backs, but we've seen the same thing with safeties. We've seen the same thing with non-pass rushing linebackers. They're devalued in the same way. We focus on running backs because they get the ball. This isn't unique to running backs. It's unique to positions where you can find value or you can find production at value costs.
Well, and it doesn't help, too, that some of the best running backs in the game haven't had the best last couple of seasons either.
Sure.
And
there's very little longevity in the position anymore.
Daniel on YouTube sparks that in my brain because he mentioned how Le'Veon Bell held out and got less money than he could have if he would have stayed with the Steelers. Same thing can be said for Melvin Gordon with the Chargers before he held out.
Look at the guys that did get paid, right? Look at Zeke Elliott got paid, fell off a cliff.
And that's
Todd Gurley got paid, fell off a cliff. And there's injuries and other stuff there.
TG was hurt more than anything, but he had a fantastic 4 or 5 year stint.
But you look at that and you go, okay, why would I pay for this when it's a better than not chance that they won't get the production out of them once I start paying them?
Were Zeke, Gurley, Bell, TJ worth what they got paid?
Well, and it seems like running backs get injured more than wide receivers.
Yeah, because they get hammered on every play.
Tight ends, all that.
But I will say this, that you still need a top guy in that room. You can't survive on a 6th-round pick. It's just not easy.
Tell that to Bill Belichick.
You just don't find that. You really just don't find that. Yeah. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Ramondre Stevenson. He doesn't really get me excited about the running back room.
No, but for tons of years they went by on discount.
Sure.
Yeah.
We'll take a break. Sports Cleanup next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 5 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio. Things you wanted us to get to from the weekend, but we didn't.
Cleanup on aisle 6.
It's the Coffee and Cream Sports Cleanup on Hail Varsity Radio.
All right, sports cleanup time here on Coffee and Cream, 590 ESPN Radio here in Omaha. Live on Twitter, live on YouTube, on KFOR in Lincoln for the 9 o'clock hour every single day. Before we move forward, though, let's take a moment and tell you about Dyer Law. Dyer is the place you need to go if you are, in a pickle. If you've been hurt in a personal injury accident, you can count on the Dyer Law team to provide you with the helping hand you need when you need it, no matter what you're dealing with. 402-393-7529 or visit Dyer.law to chat with trusted professionals about your personal injury claim. That's Dyer, D-Y-E-R .law. A couple of questions coming through on YouTube, Ravi, as we were just kind of chit-chatting a little bit about Major League Baseball trade deadlines. And then another question came in regarding Fan Day yesterday over in Lincoln. Miles Farmer will start there, not present at Fan Day. Cody asks, Miles Farmer off the Husker team? That I don't know. I think there's no report that says he is,
Sure, yeah.
But he definitely was not present there, which can lead you to believe that something is wrong or something happened. Not to say that it's like he could have been sick, right?
Yeah, maybe
there's a lot of things.
deal. I really don't know. I haven't heard anything to indicate that he's not on the team anymore. It is obviously raises a little bit of a antenna there that, hey, this guy that we, what started 11 games last year it was not at Fan Day. I think it's probably premature to speculate whether he's still on the team or not. But yeah, that's something to keep an eye on without a doubt.
That's something that I've been constantly searching on Twitter today. Just his name. At some point, I'll probably search it enough that it's trending. But no, nothing that I've seen leads me to believe that so far he's off the team now.
Now they've got a pretty.
Now add this though. Brody Tegaloa, Jacob Hood, Josh Fleeks weren't also seen at Fan Day when Mitch Sherman tweeted about Miles Farmer not being there.
Right.
So are there more players that weren't there for, a reason? I don't know. I wasn't there.
Right.
I was traveling back from Gatlinburg at this time.
And I don't think I don't think somebody not being at Fan Day is necessarily an indication of them not being a participant on the team. Like I said, could be scheduling issues, could be guys getting a last little break before fall camp starts today. You haven't heard any speculation about the other guys. So I tend to think that maybe we're overblowing it here. That's not to say something isn't happening, but I think the fact that there's been some rumors that maybe Miles Farmer won't be starting, things like that, is kind of what's fueling into people starting to speculate. And maybe there's something there, but there's nothing at this point. There's nothing to be reported or known except for that he wasn't there.
The other question that came through on YouTube was from Daniel: are sign-in trades not an option in Major League Baseball? And I believe the short answer is no, but kind of.
The short answer is it's complicated.
So here's at least what I've come up with. So just say that, the question asked, can a GM deal a player who accepts a qualifying offer unexpectedly? And then, that creates room for whatever roster changes, squeezes, things like that. So what I'm reading here is the sign and trade options not available to GMs, thanks to Article XXB5A. I know you were intrigued to know where that came from.
Yeah.
Of the MLB collective bargaining agreement. No team can trade a player who accepts a qualifying offer unless the player provides his consent. So that language means teams must keep and pay each player who accepts the offer until a certain point, unless teams obtain written permission from the player to deal him.
And part of it with baseball also is it doesn't make a ton of sense. Part of the reason there's such a big deal in basketball, for instance, is because of the way the contracts are structured. You can get more from the team you're currently on than you can from just signing with a new team. And so a lot of players will do it to get the extra money. The other team will trade them. Their current team will trade them because they know that either they help facilitate the sign and trade or they lose them for nothing. And the other team wants to do it because they really want to acquire this player, so they'll do whatever they need to in order to keep the player happy and get him there. In a sport like baseball, without strict salary structures, without a real salary cap, it just doesn't have a lot of usefulness the way it would in the NBA, for instance. But as you mentioned with the obtaining the player's consent in having a discussion, that could be useful if they were able to open a negotiation with whatever trade partner they were talking about and seeing if they could work something out there. I don't know that that's going to happen. I think there's probably more likely Ohtani's agent, because that's who we've really been talking about this with. Ohtani's agent has discussions with other ball clubs saying, yes, we would, there's a good chance we could re-sign here or things like that without, kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge situation without having an official negotiation.
Now, for those teams that, and we'll stay in Major League Baseball here because as you kind of run up and down the standings, the Orioles are at the top of the East, the Twins at the top of the Central, the Rangers in the West. Houston is pressing, though, only a game back. The Rays a game and a half back in the East. The Rays could really use bullpen help at this point. There's a lot of team needs that I almost wonder if we're getting to a point to where it's too late to make the move. Like we're pushing that deadline day. And I know a lot of times you'll see 20 minutes before the actual deadline, 30 names that pop.
But those discussions have been going on for days.
Right.
Usually,
and so at this point though, are we getting to that time if you and I were conducting a trade?
Yeah.
And I really needed a starting pitcher and you had who I wanted. If we are less than a day, which we're getting close to that point.
Yeah,
we're like a day and a half, right? If we're a day and a half away, but we had to be talking about this for a little while now. Is a trade going to get done? And that's kind of my worry with some of the teams at the top of the top, because I worry if you're not the Dodgers, if you're not, let's say the Braves, because the Braves have been really good lately. If you're not the Houston Astros, if you're not these teams that have, whether it's deep pockets or rooting success or whatever it is, and you're a team like the Orioles, or if you're a team like the Rays who made it there last year, but they're not a team that, gets a lot of players overly excited to go play in Tampa Bay, how much of a disadvantage are you at right now at this point with the time winding down? Has to be huge.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the level of player you're trying to acquire, right? The higher profile players where the trades become more complex and the trade compensation packages become larger, those trades obviously take longer because there's more moving pieces, right? If you're talking about a little bit of bullpen help here, a little bit of bullpen help there, maybe a role player, maybe a fourth outfielder, something like that, those trades can materialize pretty quickly.
Those can happen whenever.
Like in minutes,
I'm thinking big deals.
But the high-profile guys like Max Scherzer got traded yesterday, right? Justin Verlander is a guy that possibly could be on the market. He said his situation has changed now that Scherzer's gone, right? So a guy like that, for instance, Verlander, Shohei Ohtani, whoever, those, I think they can materialize in a matter of hours, but it's really, really rare. You're probably okay today still to start making those calls and things like that. But if you're the Orioles or the Rays or somebody like that, where you've got a plenty of talent in your farm system, but you have a really hard time getting free agents to come sign for you, those to me are the teams that are candidates for these quote-unquote rental guys, where it's like, hey, we know we're going to have to move. Like, we know Ohtani's not re-signing here, but we don't have a lot of success. We think we could win a World Series this year. Then you go all in. You trade in some chips from your prospects that you don't know if they're ever going to be good players or not. They're certainly never going to be Shohei Ohtani, and they can't help you this year. If you're there, I think there's a chance that some of these teams that aren't destinations, that's why I think the Rangers are kind of going all in on the pitching this year, because they have better luck than the Orioles or the Rays with free agents, but they're not a huge free agent destination most times. Those are the teams that I think have to go all in and maybe take some bigger risks at the trade deadline, because these are teams that are not generally successful year after year after year. This might be their only shot.
Now, before we get to Stephen Muehlhausen quickly here, something else I found pretty embarrassing as I was going through the archives of last week was the interview with Derek Gragg at Big Ten Media Days.
Oof.
What was that? What was he trying to accomplish? This is your first time in front of the media, and that's how you're going to conduct the interview? You're just going to constantly say that you can't share information? I mean, what was the point of that?
Yeah, why even do the interview? Like, I understand that's probably the line you have to give, but why even do the interview then?
Bro, you haven't even talked once publicly, and that's how you're first going to do it? Pretty bizarre to me. All right, Stephen Muehlhausen up next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning. We'll be back in 3 minutes.
And the counter, right hook, the left to right, Errol Spence on inline skates, and the referee has intervened.
Errol Spence.
Sharp jab, fast, explosive jab to the head and the body, and there's a combination that drops Errol Spence for the first time.
I kind of got mixed feelings about it.
Errol Spence methodically breaks you down.
Rogers and Benning. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning. We'll be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning. We'll be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
Sharp jab, fast, explosive jab to the head and the body, and there's a combination that drops Errol Spence for the first time in his career. That lightning hand speed. 7, 8. Terrence Bud Crawford, an electrifying combination that drops Errol Spence in round 2.
Man, talking about dings, let's give you a little tidbit on Dingman's Collision Center here in town. Dingman's your one-stop shop for all your car needs. But I want to talk a little bit about their Give Back program. In specific, Epic for Girls is one of the nonprofits that they work with. They're an organization that focuses on equity for girls of color in sports here in Omaha. And, not only is it leveling the playing field, but it serves as an umbrella organization to amplify sports programming and call attention to the issues of inequity in sports and addresses incidences of violence occurring in the world of youth sports in Omaha. Epic works alongside organizations providing accessible and affordable opportunities to compete in multiple sports, including but not limited to basketball, volleyball, soccer, dance, things like that. So Dingman's just always doing a great thing by investing in the community, and that's why we invest in Dingman's. That's Dingman's Collisions Center. Ravi, as we wait on Steven to hop on the show, little bit of boxing to kick things off with Crawford and Spence. Yeah, a little bit of UFC as we mentioned too. But all I noticed all I saw on social media after that fight, and I mean, not just immediately after, but the day after, was who's still thinking about that fight? Who's still thinking about this? Who's still thinking about that? It's just that, is that the imprint that Crawford leaves on you?
Yeah, I mean, it's all I've been, honestly, most of what I've been thinking about all weekend and even into this morning as I was getting ready for the show here with you is, you know, it almost like blocked out everything else sports related that happened over the weekend for me, because it was just such a dominating performance. I'm as ardent of a Bud believer as anyone. Like I said, I predicted Bud TKO 10, and I was still shocked by how good he was on Saturday. And it's the thing that I keep going back to. He's the best fighter of our time right now. And I don't know that it's particularly close.
Well, Stephen is with us now. Stephen Muehlhausen. He covers MMA, covers boxing at S. Muehlhausen Jr. on Twitter. Stephen, good morning. Thanks for taking the time.
Man, it's been a while, guys. How are you?
Good. We're even better because our guy, Bud Crawford, took down Spence over the weekend. And I shouldn't even just say took down. I mean, it was a true behind smash. After that first round, it was just all Crawford. What did you take notice to, especially during that fight? Because there was a lot of buildup and a lot of people hating on Crawford, essentially saying, hey, he hasn't really faced anybody yet. Has he finally shushed up the haters?
You know, I feel like we've been on this journey together the last few years, guys. We really have. I was thinking about it when I was talking to your producer. I was talking to Shane the other day, and I'm like, I feel like we've been on this long, winding journey together, and it finally happened. You know, I couldn't be more proud for you guys. He's your guy. You know, I know when I was at Sporting News, we had him as the 2020 Fighter of the Year. It was a one-sided beatdown, like you guys said. There was the first round, you knew what to expect because that's just Terrence.
Mm-hmm.
You know how Terrence Crawford fights. He's not going to change the way he handles that first round or two. He turned it up a little quicker than I thought he would. And you got to the second round, and I noticed with about a minute to go, he landed it was about a minute and a half left, and he landed a counter right. And I'm like, now he's there. Now he's figured him out.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mike, okay, he's starting to get it, and Spence had landed a couple shots, and I'm like, okay. And then with a minute to go, he just turned it on. And you just knew, right? He said landed a combination, knocks Spence back with a jab, and you're like, okay, that's
Stephen, a couple of things that were most surprising to me within that fight were a couple of things you touched on there. So tell me where your head was at. Number one, I was very surprised that it seemed like, and I think Bud said this in a post-fight interview, pretty early on, I think even before the knockdown, Bud realized that Spence could not hurt him even when he landed. Which I was kind of stunned by. At least that's how Crawford seemed to feel about it. And secondly, I was a little bit shocked how quickly Crawford seemed to figure Spence out. And because I was expecting 2-3 rounds of what we saw in the first round, because that's how Crawford does a lot of times. You mentioned it took him about a round and a half, and he was locked in.
It's just, he knew, and I remember me and him, and it was a conversation I remember me and him had. Was right after he beat Sean Porter.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember me and him we went off to the side and we did a quick 5-6 minute hit. And we talked about Spence, and he goes, me and you were talking about this, been talking about this since 2019.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, they kept me from not being on this side of the street.
Yeah.
I didn't belong on that side of the street. I am my own street. But you could see in his tone of voice when it came to Spence, he understood the significance of the fight.
Mm-hmm.
And then as the week went on, you're like, okay, maybe he's going to do something different. He put the pedal up a little
Mm-hmm.
Because he knew Errol Spence, and it's no knock on, it's not Sean Porter. It's not David Abanesian. This isn't Jeff Horn. This isn't Benavidez Jr. It's just a completely different animal. The guy, you can't take nothing away from Errol Spence. 3-belt unified welterweight champion. He is a beast. But at the end of the day, Terrence Crawford knew, I have to start quicker. Bomac knew, we have to start quicker. We can't wait 3 rounds. We can't give him that much needed confidence. Let's take his will. Let's take his spirit. As soon as Crawford ate the first big left hand, it was over. You could basically say it was a wrap. He was eating those shots, and it didn't bother him. He was walking through them. He put the pedal quicker when he normally, like you said, he doesn't do that. He knew what was at stake. He knew he couldn't let Spence get that momentum. And look at what we saw. It was knocked him down twice in the second. Then look at what happened in the 7th. I thought that fight should have been stopped in the 7th. I had plenty of people from the Spence camp, the TBC camp telling me, well, why did you tweet that for? That fight should have been stopped after the 7th round.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Ravi was reiterating that same point earlier on in the show.
It was over.
I felt bad for Errol Spence.
Yeah, the last 2 rounds for sure. Yeah.
He should not have been allowed to take that beating.
His corner had to help him at some point, I thought.
I think that showed his corner did him no favor.
Yeah.
And I said this to a couple people, and there's plenty of people in boxing not happy that I said this, but if I'm Ryan Garcia, I'm Anthony Joshua, I'm kind of looking at being like, what if that's me in there?
Mm-hmm.
How is my trainer gonna have my back?
Yeah.
And from what I saw, and Errol's Derek Sky, he's been with Derek James since coming out of the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't a guy that's just come to the gym. Terrence laid a beat down, and Derek James let that unnecessarily happen.
Steven,
I thought that was unfortunate for Errol because Errol didn't deserve that.
Steven, you talked about quick starts. Quickly here, got about a minute and a half. Justin Gaethje and Derek Lewis had some pretty quick starts on the UFC stage.
Derek Lewis is just
flying knee, little Masvidal like.
He went all Jorge Masvidal on us, and I didn't see that coming. I don't think the world saw that coming, and Derek Lewis is in a good spot now. Shockingly, the UFC did not sign him to a new deal. Derek didn't like the money after talk. I talked to him late last week, and the UFC just didn't offer him what he was looking for. So he's a free agent. I think he's going to the PFL. I think he's going to go fight Francis Ngannou. I think that's going to happen. I know people in PFL are interested. You go to Justin Gaethje, and I wasn't expecting a head kick knockout. I'll put it that way. And Justin Gaethje showed the world. He's made his adjustments. He's fighting a lot smarter, not harder. And look what he just did to Dustin Poirier. What an amazing performance by Justin Gaethje. If I'm him, I take the Makhachev, Oliveira. In October, you don't know when you're talking about waiting maybe till next March, February, March.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm Justin Gaethje, I'm fighting Conor McGregor.
Ooh.
I know Justin dismissed it. Conor wants to fight. Justin, they've been angling each other for a while. Gaethje's saying Conor's declined to fight. I don't know if that's accurate, but Justin's like, I don't want to fight him. If you're going to get offered the money, a lot of these guys get offered to fight Conor McGregor. It's life-changing money, and it's life-changing if you beat him. Look at what happened with Khabib.
Mm-hmm.
Look at Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz is about to headline his own pay-per-view.
Yeah.
Doing a boxing. So it's worked out very well for Nate. It worked out very well for Dustin Poirier, and it worked out very well for Khabib. And I think it also could work out very well for Justin Gaethje. So I think that'd be one.
Steven, we appreciate the time this morning. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. Talk soon.
Yes, sir. Steven Muehlhausen, MMA and boxing, UFC. He kind of does it all. Before we let you go, Sunday, August 13th at 7 p.m. on Nebraska Public Media. In the Deed, the Glory Memorial Stadium. It reveals the story, history, evolution, and significance of the stadium that is synonymous with Saturdays in Nebraska. Mark your calendars. Again, that's August 13th, Sunday at 7 p.m. on Nebraska Public Media. Thanks for joining us on today's show. Thanks for Ravi for filling in maybe one last time. Who knows? DB should be back tomorrow. That'll do for Coffee and Cream.